Good morning and welcome to the July 19th edition of the Board of County Commissioners regular morning meeting. We have no emergency business this morning. We're all present and like to begin with the agenda. Mr. Rickoff will be here in place of Mr. Mokrahisi today. Thank you, Mr. Rickoff, for being here this morning. And do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
Thank you, Chair Farr. The only adjustment we have is we actually have emergency business.
In fact, I heard that. So then no adjustments from the board. Then to you, Mr. Rickoff, for emergency business.
Right. And I'm going to introduce Dan Hurley, our Director of Public Works, who I think is going to be representing this item on the Lane County EV conversion blueprint and the letter of support.
Good morning, Commissioners. So we're bringing a letter of support to you as emergency business. It's being brought as emergency business just because of the timing for applying for a grant. This letter of support is for LCOG and the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MPO, to do work on behalf of the county to develop an electric vehicle strategy. Since the board's adoption of the Phase 2 Climate Action Plan, we've been working with LCOG to see if they would take a lead role in developing an EV strategy. Conversion to electric vehicles was identified as a significant strategy in our climate action plan for reducing greenhouse gases. And so this work would allow them to do that. The Eugene Water and Electric Board, EWEB, is offering a new grants program for promoting electric vehicles. So this work would allow LCOG to be able to do the work to assess information about transportation data, use of vehicles, use of electric vehicles, infrastructure, identify barriers, do outreach with the community and start developing that regional strategy. So we're pretty excited for this work to move forward so we can continue to implement the climate action plan. Would like to see your support for this letter of support. I would like to note, Greg brought to my attention, there are some Scrivener errors in the letter that we'll need to address. So if we could get your approval and its concept, and we'll make sure to address those and get the letter forwarded corrected.
Thank you, Mr. Director Hurley. I noted that for everybody watching and everybody here, the material has been added to today's agenda. So if you look up the recent version, today's version of today's agenda, click view material, you can actually see this letter. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions, comments. I see no questions or comments, Mr. Hurley, so we're ready for a motion. Mr. Rickoff, do we need motion or head nods?
It's an excellent question. I think I'll defer to Diana Jones for that.
Head nods would be just fine.
Perfect. Then mine is nodding.
So is mine.
Looks like Commissioner Bozievich.
I would have appreciated a motion instead, but and seeing there's not one, I'm going to just voice my opposition to this letter, my opposition to the misguided attempt to force electric vehicles on the public. It's not the solution to our climate problem. It's just moving the carbon footprint from your tailpipe to a power plant at this point. And it's being overly subsidized and steered by the government. It's a huge government intervention in the economy, which we're seeing in inflation today. Kansas City just announced that they're getting a EV battery plant that's going to cost $4 billion. They're putting up $8 billion in tax credits to do it. So this is just a misguided attempt, and I just want to express that I am not supporting this letter.
Thank you for that comment, Commissioner Bozievich. And just for the record, by rules, any one of us make a motion at any time, and if it gets a second, we will follow through as a motion. And I see no motion at this point in time. Any further discussion? Then I'm looking around. You have 4 head nods. We don't need to talk about any abstentions or lack of head nods. So, do you have everything you need, Mr. Director Hurley?
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Sorry for my. I've just changed to calling directors director instead of Mr. and Ms. So, very good. Very good. Well, thank you. Then any further emergency business, Mr. Rickoff?
No, Chair Farr, we can move ahead with the agenda.
Thanks very much. So we'll move down to item 3, which is public comments. Today we'll be entertaining public comments from people present in Harris Hall and from people online with our hybrid meeting. We'll entertain comments from people in Harris Hall first. It will be followed by the online comments, after which I'll ask if anyone else in Harris Hall wishes to provide commentary to the board this morning. You're going to have 3 minutes. There's no warning ahead of 3 minutes. Just keep an eye on the clock and you'll know when the 3 minutes is expiring. For those of you present in the hall, the clock will be on to my left, to your right. For those of you online, the clock will be visible on your screen. So at this point, I'm going to call on Eric Wold, who will be followed by Karen Gaffney.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Eric Wold. I've been a resident of Eugene for 25 years. I'm currently the president of the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club, which is a 501c7 nonprofit. We have 650 dues-paying members, and it is literally growing every week. Of those people who play pickleball locally, our club members maybe represent 25 to 30% of all the pickleball players. So there are a lot of pickleball players in this area. I'm also a board member of a 501c3 foundation, which was created to help raise funds for a regional pickleball facility. I'm here today to voice my support for the proposed local option levy for Lane County parks. That's later on your agenda today. And specifically, I want to state my support for the special project list, including the regional pickleball facility, which will be located at Lane Community College. So why is a regional pickleball facility needed? Well, pickleball has been and still is the fastest growing sport in the country, and demand for places to play far exceeds the space available here in Lane County. Every day, if you go out to the courts, you'll find dozens of people waiting to get on the courts. So we need more courts in the area. That is why, as a club and a foundation, we are fostering a public-private partnership to create a wonderful, welcoming regional pickleball facility at Lane Community College. When built, this facility will be open to the general public, that is, to all community members. The facility will have a tremendous impact on the community. It will really be a special place. Pickleball, if you haven't played, is a sport that brings people together of all abilities, skill levels, and ages to promote and foster good health, fitness, and social connections. This facility will be a vibrant place full of laughter, intergenerational social connections, and people having fun playing a sport. It will also generate economic vitality. People who play pickleball travel all over the country, and they often base their decisions on where to go based on if there's a good pickleball facility to play at. And this will be a wonderful place that will be a destination for people to come to our community to play pickleball, and it'll generate revenue for the community from hotel stays, restaurant stays, or restaurant visits. Importantly, Lane County would not be responsible for maintaining the facility. Other partners will pick up that responsibility. We look forward to seeing the levy on the ballot. We look forward to seeing the ballot measure pass, and we look forward to seeing Lane County be a funding partner in this wonderful facility. Lane County's funding would be augmented by both private and other public dollars to create a large impact for our community's recreation, health, and well-being that no single organization could do on its own. That truly is the power of partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wold. I'll now call on Karen Gaffney, who will be followed by simply Nicholas.
Morning, Chair Farr and commissioners. It's lovely to be back in this room with you all. I'm Karen Gaffney, and in addition to being a retired director of County's Health and Human Services Department, I will say I'm also a member of the Emerald Valley Pickleball Club that Eric just described and the foundation that's supporting that work as well. Eric's testimony really summarized in a fantastic way the excitement around this project. There are a couple things I specifically wanted to lift up, though, as I thought about all of the discussions we have had in this room over the years about the importance of the health of our community and how we best can protect and promote the health of individuals and our whole community. And I firmly believe that the parks levy that you're talking about later in your agenda today is a critical policy choice in how to support that health in the community. Coming out of COVID, I think that all of us in the community have an even deeper appreciation of the role of our parks than we had 5 years ago. Throughout the pandemic, they provided outdoor spaces across the county where people can have an affordable option to be together, to be outdoors, relatively safe, and to recreate, have physical activity, and support their mental health. Those places are truly treasures in our communities, and we need them now more than ever. The staff report that includes a list of investments feels to me like a great balanced list in terms of needs, geography, population served, and attention to equity concerns. I had the opportunity to participate in one of the regional community meetings that the parks staff hosted, and I see the list of ideas that came from the community really reflected back in that packet that's coming to you today. And I want to just lift up a couple things specifically about pickleball, maybe underscore some of what Eric talked to you about for those of you who haven't had an opportunity yet to play the game. Part of why pickleball is growing so fast in this community and in this country is that it's a fun place where everyone can play. If you go out to our courts, you'll see a cross section of the community, people from 8 to 80 who are playing together and connecting. They're from different socioeconomic and racial groups in the community, people with disabilities and able-bodied people. It really is our community reflected in those courts. It makes me think about Surgeon General Vivek Murthy's comments about loneliness and the pandemic of, or the epidemic of loneliness that we're facing. And while it may seem silly in some ways, I will tell you that pickleball provides an intervention to help address that loneliness by creating a space to be together. So thank you for your support in this work.
And thank you, former director. Yeah. Next in Harris Hall, we have Nicholas, who will be followed by the virtual queue.
Good morning, County Commissioners. Good morning, everyone in the audience. I'd like to bring up last meeting where we had Lane County Public Health show up and fearmonger about the virus, wearing masks. It only shows to me how the loss of their validity and respect, because anyone here can look up what they wear in a virology lab. They don't wear masks, certainly not surgical masks. And it should be common sense, and it only degrades the validity of the health department. Furthermore, there are no studies. There is nothing that shows that being jabbed multiple times, it has any effectiveness towards new variants. No, there were no trials done on these new variants. So there's no way that we can know whether or not it's effective at reducing hospitalization or symptoms. I am a landlord, I am a waiter, and I am a high-risk individual because I don't wear a mask, I never have, and I am around people who don't. I haven't been sick at all, not once. And I would like to say I appreciate what Jay has to say about electrification. We should not be dependent upon other countries, other places, especially China, for batteries. All of the electric cars, all of the electrification comes from fossil fuels. You have mines. Mines need fossil fuels because you have to run the trucks. You have to mine everything. You have to process it. Plastics. Most all electric cars are made up of plastic. Plastic comes from fossil fuels. So the idea that we're going to run around in circles and do all of this is again, like the health thing, it just doesn't add up, has little or no common sense. And I just really wish that people can talk about this and without being silenced or censored. It doesn't, again, do anything to help the validity when people are censored and when things are brushed under the rug. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicholas. And that concludes the in-person testimony. Ms. Jones, I'll call on you to carry out the virtual queue.
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, if you have registered for public comment using the virtual platform, I would ask you to please raise your virtual hand so I can get a head count on who's planning on presenting today. I will call your name and unmute your microphone, and you may begin your public comment. Our first speaker will be Phil Barnhart. Phil, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Phil, I do show you. There you go.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Phil Barnhart. I'm the president of the Emerald Valley Electric Vehicle Association, the local chapter of the International Electric Vehicle Association. EVEVA's several hundred volunteer members take their cars to public events. We host Rev Up, the Zoom EV 101 program to educate people from Ashland to Lincoln City and especially Lane County and beyond to encourage the adoption of EVs. We engage in public discourse and support legislation to encourage electric vehicle adoption. Thanks to the excellent work of county staff, including your climate guru, Mark Nystrom, we know that far and away the largest local source of carbon pollution is transportation fuels. Moving to electrified transportation is the single most important action we all can take to clean up our local environment. Mr. Chair, I want to thank the Lane County Commission and the Lane Council of Governments this morning for actions like the adoption of the letter that you're sending to EWEB and your excellent staff for its work to begin the transition to clean electric operation for the county and for our public. Your support means that the county will save taxpayer money on operations, support the health of county workers and the public who will no longer be breathing polluting exhaust. You will get your work done with more powerful, quieter, and more competent vehicles and construction and maintenance equipment. Most important, your actions to electrify transportation and work already taken and planned for the future, together with thousands of other local governments and businesses and millions of individuals and families, will ensure the healthy planet that we enjoyed and our grandchildren deserve. Thank you for your work. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you, former Rep.
Thank you for your public comment, Mr. Barnhart. Our next speaker is Ann Nealand. Ann Nealand is the last person I show with the hand raised. So if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Ann, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good morning. My name is Ann Nealand. How disheartening it is that Lane County Public Health is swinging into gear to launch more vaccination campaigns with the same old vaccines that cannot stop the transmission of COVID, and now with the newly authorized zeal to go after our children. Data shows that COVID cases among children are very low, and most children probably have natural immunity already. Most importantly, there's a frightening lack of data and studies around the effectiveness of these jabs in children, coupled with an apparent disregard for the potential risks from the vaccines. Dr. Marty McCary, a top public health expert at Johns Hopkins University, reports that the Pfizer study using 3-dose vaccine in 992 children between the ages of 6 months and 5 years found no statistically significant evidence of vaccine efficacy. Dr. McCary remarked that the Pfizer results, quote, should have given pause to those who are in charge of public health, unquote. Concerning Moderna's results, Dr. McCary reported that a study was conducted on 6,388 children with 2 doses And the results were not much better. Against asymptomatic infections, Moderna claimed a very weak vaccine efficacy of just 4% in children ages 6 months to 2 years. They also claim an efficacy of 23% in children between the ages 2 and 6 years, but neither results are statistically significant. And the unimpressive efficacy is just one part of the picture. What about the potential harms of the unapproved vaccines? As of July 9th, 2022, VAERS, the U.S. government's vaccine adverse event reporting system, states that there have been 1,341,605 adverse health events from the COVID jabs and 29,460 deaths. In children ages 6 months to 17 years, the VAERS reporting system has reported already 124 deaths, 477 left permanently disabled, and 1,844 cases of myocarditis. Keep in mind that a Harvard study reviewed VAERS from 2007 to 2010, and it concluded that likely the adverse effects reported on the VAERS system represent fewer than 1% of adverse effects from the vaccine, fewer than 1%. You do the math with today's numbers. I want to ask this board, has anyone made a compelling case with data and studies that the current non-emergency circumstances warrant the unnecessary and irresponsible campaign against our children? Are you taking your personal responsibility to oversee Lane County Public Health seriously? Is your moral duty to serve and protect our community's children and adults met by signing off on Dr. Jocelyn Warren's plan? Has she provided studies and data to you to justify a vaccination campaign directed at the...
Thank you for your public comment. I did have 2 more hands raised. Our next speaker will be Harry Sanger, followed by Tressa Beaver. Mr. Sanger, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Mr. Sanger, I show you are self-muted.
Thank
There you
you.
go.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I don't have a prepared statement, but you know, I was sitting here listening and saw a former public health employee or director with a mask on, and there's clearly if anybody's familiar with the author Thomas Sowell, there's a conflict of visions at work here. There's a group of people that believe one thing, and those people have been running this county into the ground. I don't think anybody can look around and say that they truly feel like we're prospering around here. And I must say that it feels great. Everything that happened in the city of Eugene leading up to the World Athletic Championships has really revitalized the feeling that people expect from a community. And that's been missing. And it's going to be missing when people are hiding and running and wearing masks for no reason. And I think the previous speaker really broke down. We don't know that what we're doing is the right thing. And I was told for months, well, we need to do it anyways because it's the safe thing. But after 2 years, we can see that the communities that didn't overreact aren't any worse off than the communities that did overreact. And the economies in the communities that did overreact are markedly worse. And so that's the conflict of visions. When I warned people, don't overreact to COVID, they said, oh, you just want to go out and have a burger and a beer. And I said, that's not it at all. I see that there's a future that's going to be worse if we make a future that's going to be worse. And I would rather make a future that's going to be better. And in order to do that, we need to hear from marginalized voices, and that includes politically marginalized voices. I feel like I've essentially been blackballed in this community. I've applied for boards and commissions with the city, with the 4J school district, and with the county now, and I'm turned away every time. And is it because I'm incapable or not a good leader? Or is it because I speak my mind and I'm an activist, but I'm an activist for the wrong cause? Because I see activists fighting for a fossil-free Eugene gloated over and worshipped. And then if I say we need fossil fuels because farm tractors don't run on electricity and boiler systems for manufacturing plants don't run on electricity. And as a previous speaker, Nicholas, pointed out, electricity requires raw materials beyond what fossil fuels require. It's a complicated system. The best way to deal with a complicated system is to include a full diversity of voices, and that includes people that the Eugene Weekly readers might label as conservatives. I'm just here trying to do the best for my community, and I really hope that I'm included in more conversations going forward, that Nicholas is included, that Ann's included, because it feels like these voices are being marginalized.
Thank you for your public comment. Our next speaker is Tressa Beaver, and I do show that Tressa is our last speaker. Tressa, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. And I also thank Ann Nealon, Harry Singer, Nicholas, and all of those who stand for freedom and the truth in our community. I do feel very marginalized, and that those who speak the truth and have these concerns about the vaccine mandates, the mask mandates, and trying to push these vaccines on children is completely unacceptable. And if you, as the county commissioners, were really doing your research and doing your job effectively, these conversations would no longer be happening, because there would be a complete stop to these mandates altogether. I request that you all take a pause and look at the real data, even the data of the CDC. How many people have been murdered from these vaccines that you are all responsible for if you're pushing this agenda, by the way? You will be held accountable. And I request that you really look into these things and that you stop this madness. Our businesses in our communities are being shut down, failing because of this draconian push for totalitarianism. It is unacceptable. We are free people. We all, in the whole entire world, not just in the United States, but the entire world deserves to be free. To make our own decisions, to not be lied to and manipulated into wearing masks and getting in line to get a vaccine. Oh, I can't have my job. I can't do my work. I can't be a massage therapist. I can't do whatever because I'm not vaccinated. Bull pucky. You are responsible for for the decisions that are being made. And it is crucial that you look at the real data. How many people have been injured? How many people have died from this vaccine? How many lives have been impacted? Look at the economy. Oh, is it really that great? I would say absolutely.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, Chair Farr, I have no additional hands raised, so I will return public comment back to you.
And excuse me, thank you, Ms. Jones, for handling the virtual queue. At this point, I'll ask if anyone else in Harris Hall wishes to provide testimony to the Board of Commissioners. I see none. Then we'll move along to Commissioners' response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrances. I'll turn to the board. I see none, so I have two. That usually signals that somebody else will raise their hand. The first one is in response to Mr. Sanger. I know that you, in your words, I am just trying to do the best for our community. I know that. That is very evident to me, as we all are. We sitting up here, we sitting in the audience, as Sheriff Harold is, as Greg Rakoff is, we're all trying to do the best for our community. And sometimes we view things a little bit differently. Regarding Dr. McCary. Dr. McCary did talk about the public having a misskewed perception of the risk. However, this is also what Dr. McCary said. Americans who haven't been vaccinated or previously infected with COVID need to be careful, quote, end quote. He said that. And that's what we're doing. We're being careful in our way, and we're doing what we can do to be careful. And just bear that in mind. The second thing I'll mention is an incident last night. A constituent, a good friend of mine, had a car theft last night west of Eugene, in the county. And they called the sheriff's department, got dispatched. Dispatch, I've heard, was very, very friendly, very courteous, and dispatched sheriffs. And very quickly, we had Sheriff, Deputy Ware and I'm sorry, Weiser and Kane. Thank you. I had it written down, but I'm losing my mind on this because I'm speaking secondhand. Anyway, the deputies came out, took a report, and by this morning, the sheriff's department had found the stolen car. So what that gave my constituent, my friend, the impression is that our deputies just did a superb job, both courteously, swiftly, responsively, and did their job finding their car this morning. Not unlike they did their job last week when Sergeant Combs, who's sitting with us today, very quickly apprehended a murder suspect. And just my congratulations to my neighbor, Sergeant Combs, for the work that you've done. We'll be talking to the Sheriff's Department a little bit later on in this day, but Sheriff Harold, who's sitting here with us, thank you very much. Please pass my constituents' thanks along to your dispatch and to the deputies.
Chair.
Commissioner Burney.
You're right. It's just I'm so slow. I would just like to make two comments in addition to thanking everyone and agreeing that oftentimes minority opinion is the most important opinion in a democracy. Can you hear me? Okay. First, to the pickleballers, the pickleball group. You remind, and especially to Ms. Gaffney's comments, you remind me of, I believe it was 1995, Robert Putnam, way before COVID, way before the era we're living in now, wrote an article which I believe was called Bowling Alone. And he discussed the increasing social isolation almost 30 years ago that was occurring in this country. And it's only been exacerbated through natural forces. One can think of the corporate ownership out of our county of newspapers, various economic trends, various social trends. So it really, for me, is very refreshing to hear pragmatic, practical, normal discussion about just getting out there, having fun. I swear I would had I not just had my surgery, but I will. My children do. And so I really appreciate that because I think there's something profound in the simple aspect of people getting out, breathing fresh air, getting exercise, talking to one another. And I thank you for that. I also want to make a comment in response to some comments that have been made. And I want to thank Phil Barnhart for your comments. We don't always know what we're doing. We all are trying to do our best. The climate issues, which, by the way, if you've been following what's happening in Europe right now, it's pretty phenomenal. I mean, airport runways are warping, railroad tracks are melting, different roads are melting. Europe is not prepared for this kind of heat dome. I remember last year we experienced that. EVs are not the answer. Having buildings of certain sizes become their own clean energy power plants is not the answer. Having all the utilities in Lane County by 2034, this will occur because of volume purchasing by our COUs, our consumer-owned utilities, so that Lane County, in fact, will have a utility structure that's 100% clean energy. That is not the answer. But all of these things and others combined create the beginning of figuring out how to get to a net zero Lane County. We will have hits, we will have misses, We are figuring it out as we go along. But to those naysayers, I say nay. I say I'm delighted that this board approved that. And we need to understand that we're now moving in a different direction and we're doing the best we can. So I just wanted to comment on those 2 points, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to do it after your remarks, which should have come last. So thank you.
Well, you've triggered more remarks from me. Any further comment from the board? Vice Chair Krieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just briefly remind anyone watching or anyone here in the room that the Lane County Fair starts tomorrow, and that your Fair Board and the many, many vendors and others, and particularly our staff, have been working hard to not only make it a successful fair, but a safer fair than ever. There are a lot of measures in place, but including a clear bag policy. I want to make sure people know that so they don't get hung up at the entrance. They can get in there and have fun and meet their neighbors and whoever's here from out of town enjoying the Lane County Fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And just to add one thing, Sheriff Harold, Deputy K is a deputy for Veneta, and Deputy K actually stepped outside of the bounds of his district to help a person in need out in that general area. So once again, pass those remarks along. And to the pickleballers, very quickly, I wish it were called like Wolverine ball or something like that, but we're fine. Any further comment from the board? Then we will move directly along with our next item on the agenda, which is our consent calendar. We have before us a consent calendar. Every item on the consent calendar, anyone watching, if you click on view item, you'll see what the Board of Commissioners has considered before passing this consent calendar. So to the board, do I have a motion?
Chair, I'll move passage of the consent calendar for Tuesday, July 19th, 2022.
Second. Moved by Vice Chair Krieger, seconded by Commissioner Burney. Discussion to the motion? I'm seeing none. Then I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Moving down to the item 6A from the Sheriff's Office. And Mr. Rickoff, typically I would ask you to introduce the panel, but today we're with Sheriff Harold, who is a separate elected official. So I'll introduce the panel and then turn it over to Sheriff Harold to begin the resolution. We'll be looking at resolution and order 22-07-1904 in the matter accepting a grant award from Oregon Criminal Justice Commission in the amount of $1,927,601.08 over 3 years and delegating authority to the county administrator to execute the award. Today we have on our panel Sheriff Harold. Sheriff Harold, thank you for being here today. We have Captain DJ Mann. Captain Mann, good to see you again. We have Sergeant Marvin Combs. Sergeant Combs, welcome, my neighbor, and Chief Deputy Wilkerson sitting in the audience, who you can pull up a chair if you wish. Thank you. Sheriff Harold, please.
Thank you, Chair Farr. Excuse me. Thank you and good morning. Oftentimes when we have conversations, we talk about a couple of things: lack of resources for public safety in Lane County, which has been a decades-long issue. But we also often talk about leveraging funds. And so the conversation we get to have this morning is related to the possibility of leveraging some funding from the state of Oregon. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Mann, and Sergeant Combs is what we would call an SME for us, a subject matter expert on the topic. So he's here to help us fill in any gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, board. I'm DJ from the Sheriff's Office. I'm going to talk about some issues around legal marijuana operations and then this grant that we've been qualified for. Lane County has always been a very popular place to illegally grow marijuana. That's somewhat because of the ideal growing climate and then our vast landmass, very large county. And then there's a factor of having a very low law enforcement presence out there looking for this kind of stuff. It's been about 10 years since we've had a deputy or a detective assigned specifically to any kind of drug enforcement. And that was back with the old INET team, right? In Lane County, on the recreational marijuana program through the state, there's 521 sites that are licensed. So that's producers, dispensaries, wholesalers. There's another 642 grow sites through the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. And then there's another 62 hemp farms that are sanctioned through the Oregon Department of Agriculture. So there's a lot of, the marijuana industry is very active in Lane County.
And what happens is it's pretty easy for illegal operations to hide amongst that in plain sight, basically. And some of the biggest advocates for some enforcement and regulation are actually the legal ones, the legal operations that are jumping through hoops, and many of them are safety measures. For instance, a dispensary that has to have 24-hour camera surveillance. So if they are robbed, it gives us some tools. It's a deterrence to not be robbed. Without regulation, there are hazards associated with illegal operations. So anyone watching the news lately have seen some of the massive illegal operations that are occurring. They are all over the state, but predominantly in Southern Oregon, right? They just seem to have exploded. As a result, Jackson County and Josephine County actually declared states of emergency over some of the negative things that are happening in their community because of these operations. The tactic of the illegal operations just seems to be to flood the county with these operations, knowing that law enforcement can only address so many at a time, right? Not long ago, we had Sergeant Martin Combs attend a conference in Southern Oregon where they specifically talked about these issues and current trends. And kind of the theme of that was prepare yourself if you're not in Southern Oregon, because it's coming your way, right? Even our neighbors to South, Douglas County, they have a 13-person team, a multi-agency team that focus on these type of investigations, and they're very active, and they're warning us, get ready, because our efforts are going to push them your way, right? So I'll talk about some of the specific problems that these operations do cause for the community. The humanitarian crisis issues surrounding human trafficking, terrible working conditions for the workers. This is unregulated. They're not protected by OSHA, right? A real sad example, I think it was last year in Josephine County, a gravely ill worker was dumped off at a gas station, dumped off at a gas station, and that worker died. A homicide victim that was found buried on a grow site. I recently just read an article where workers, and this was actually in Deschutes County, some of the workers were only being paid $20 a day. And they're working in really remote locations and they're living on site. So they don't have a lot of resources to kind of escape that to some degree. And some of them have actually thought they were working in legitimate agriculture. They were going to work in legitimate agriculture, only to be kind of forced into that situation. At the conference, Sergeant Combs was told that in Josephine and Jackson County, 80% of their homicides related to the marijuana industry. Then there's the environmental impact of the illegal operation. Almost all illegal operations will involve some degree of water theft. If you're going to grow a crop or you're going to farm, you're going to have water rights and get permits. Depending on what kind of operation you're running, you're probably stealing water, whether it's out in the woods, siphoning off a creek, to even residential city water that's being used for commercial application of a big indoor grow, or maybe even a well out in the county that is not being used for residential purposes. It's you're irrigating your crop with it, and drought and water rights is kind of a big deal in Oregon. Another issue is illegal dumping, especially when you get out in the public forest lands. If you have people living out growing in a large operation, their supplies are dropped off to them. They're not going to pack those supplies out. They're going to hide those supplies so they're not seen from the air, basically, and leave them. So unused fertilizer, you name it. Another issue is dangerous chemicals and fertilizers, and just the use of them. I saw a study where soil tests showed elevated levels of contaminants in the forest land in the areas where there had been a grow, because those chemicals leach into the soil and into the water. And like an example of that is small animals, rodents will eat on the plants, so they put rodenticide all over the base of the plants, and then the birds get on it. They're just, that's not how you use that stuff. Those chemicals are regulated. There's a lot of code and land use issues surrounding an illegal operation. Depending on which type of operation it is, you might have, well, a real common one is the wiring and the buildings being set up without permit. Wiring is often really poor. For instance, a residential electrical system, they might tap into that and actually be using enormous amounts of power to grow indoors, heavy power load. It's not designed for that, and it becomes a real safety hazard. Here, I have some examples of that in a minute. And then there's a process called butane hash oil extraction. So you're pulling the THC, the active ingredient, out of the plant material. And that process involves using solvents. And it's actual chemical reaction. It creates, there's a volatile fumes. They're dangerous, right? They can catch on fire, they can explode. There was a kind of a large explosion in Cottage Grove a few years ago, right in the city limits in a warehouse. Last year in Bailey Hill, a couple people were injured when a BHO lab blew up. Another example, one that didn't blow up, but Sheriff's Office served a search warrant out in rural Lane County, and there was a very large lab. This looked like something out of a science lab. Very complex. It was active. It took the DEA helped shut it down. They actually worked with the guy that was running it to safely shut it down. And we were told that had that exploded, it could be like a city block size explosion. So this is out in rural Lane County in the trees during fire season. So we can imagine what that could cause if something like that happened. That same location, while there wasn't marijuana growing on site, it was part of a larger operation, just to show how these things kind of cross paths with different illegal operations. There was a farmhouse there that was completely filled with mushrooms, and I mean completely from the floor to the ceiling. The entire structure was used for nothing but growing mushrooms illegally. There was a cash counter next to the lab, a commercial cash counter. There was $80,000 cash on site with some of the product. So these are complex investigations. These are not something that deputies in uniform in between shagging calls running as we do in the county have the time and resources to investigate. So the Sheriff's Office is all about relationships, and Sergeant Combs has been very actively building relationships with some of our partnering agencies and community-based organizations. He reached out to Catholic Community Services and the mission over the issue of, and we expect we might find some workers that have been victimized, and we want to be able to connect them with the services. We're not after them from a criminal end. We want to connect them with some services if they're encountered and they want assistance. Land use, Sergeant Combs actually got a Josephine County Code compliance officer to come meet with one of our compliance officers and explain the complexities and some of the dangers associated with doing your job and then it crossing into a large scale illegal operation. And that kind of stemmed out of one of our Lane County compliance officers stumbling into one that we were kind of watching anyway. We want to just have that open line of communication, and we'll assist with those kind of things. Sergeant Combs met with 3 water masters. They're excited about having a partnership to look into some of these issues. The Department of Agriculture for Oregon, there's some real issues around compliance with these even sanctioned operations. And then the OLCC that regulates the recreational program. On a side note, an inspector told Sergeant Combs that, well, we see very obvious suspicious activity, even downright criminal things that are happening, but they know that we're so shorthanded, they don't call because they don't expect that we'll be able to address it. And those calls also come from the public. If you live next to one of these operations, we do get calls about suspicious activity or safety concerns, and having a resource to look into these things will be fantastic. So, excuse me. Okay, so I'll get into the specifics of the grant funding and what we want to do with it. Originally, we asked for $4.6 million. The asks from the counties and the different agencies were about double what was available in the pot. So we ended up being awarded just shy of $2 million. That money needs to be used by the end of 2025. So what that would provide is two detectives and one supervisor, working full time, and then overtime to pay deputies when we need extra help. They're very labor intensive operations when it comes time to serve a search warrant and dismantle the operation. Originally, we wanted to contract a full-time prosecutor through DA's office, but the money awarded just doesn't allow that to come together. But we've been in conversations with the DA's office, and they support our pursuance of this, using this money, and they will definitely work with us. We do have a full-time criminal analyst that will come work for us, and that's supplied through the National Guard counter drug team. And they will provide this analyst at no cost to the sheriff's office. We've secured some free office space from a partner, and we're going to use shipping containers for low-cost storage, and our detectives are going to drive used vehicles. Sorry, Marv. So we're excited about the opportunity to have a little bit more capacity and get it up and running. And we understand we're not going to be able to stop all this, but we want to get in front of it a little bit, have a safety valve, and we want to pursue the biggest offenders in our county. We also don't believe this problem is going to go away, and there'll probably be additional revenue through the state. The agencies that already had a team stood up, they did fairly well in the grant process. Some of them got several times more than we did. So I think that's all now. The sheriff and I would be happy to answer any questions or try to.
Thank you, Captain Mann. And I'm going to thank you personally for the help that you gave me when I received some threatening letters maybe 5 or 6 years ago, long before you achieved rank of captain. Thank you for that. To the board, we do have a 10:30 time certain today, and we do have one significant item before that 10:30 time certain, which is scheduled for about 40 to 45 minutes. So bearing that in mind, questions, first I'll turn to you, Sheriff Harold. Anything you need to add? No. And Sergeant Combs? Just thanks for being here this morning. To the board for questions, comments? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate particularly Lane County as a community. We want to make sure that workers are protected, that the environment is preserved, and that safety is top job. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to ensure that's true. I'm thinking about, we've just been talking about heat domes and worker, there are now protections for workers in place around extreme heat, people who work outdoors, and these folks are not protected. So from that perspective, I just appreciate how this fits with an overall effort to keep Lane County a safer place for workers, for the environment, and around safety overall. I see no downside to approving this. And my only question is, I noticed that there's a start date of April 1. So is this money then going to backfill, or are we going to push the timeline out, or just that timing piece is all, or do we extend the end date, which is currently the end of calendar 2025? Does that affect anything at all, how we spend the money?
Thank you. And for those at home who may not have heard that, the beginning date will start at do you want to step forward, Ms. Haller? And if you would introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Debbie Haller. I am the finance manager for the Sheriff's Office. Chair Farr and commissioners, the beginning date of the grant will be on the execution of the grant, which will be when the state returns it signed to us, and the end date will not change at this point in time. There may be an opportunity to get a no-cost extension, but we won't know that until we get further into the grant process.
And I'll just add a little bit to that. The state really wanted to push this funding out quicker, but they really struggled with the fact that the asks were so much greater than the availability. And so there were multiple meetings trying to decide how to deal with that. So the state actually fell behind their own timeline, which is what lands us here.
Thank you.
And we won't talk about timelines of the DOJ versus OHA. We won't talk about that. Excuse me. Anything else from, thank you, Ms. Heller, for the information. Former Vice Chair, former Chair. Commissioner Buck.
Well, I'm really excited for this particular grant. I know it's not everything that you asked for, but it's certainly a good deal of resources for something that is crucially needed. I know that you all go out and serve and are in very dangerous circumstances and do go to calls that are from the cursory activities, but this is often one of the main reasons why those other activities are occurring in our rural areas. I get calls about that all the time, just as you get the real calls to go out and figure out what's happening. But I really want to see the root causes of these issues being addressed. And so does the public, especially in East Lane, and probably a lot of our rural communities see this and they don't know what to do about it. Clearly, they know that we don't have the resources, as you mentioned, and they see a lot of other nefarious activity going on that they can't stop because this just continues a cycle within Lane County, and this will hopefully address that. And I also don't see that 3 years is going to be enough to continue this kind of activity. It's hopefully something that we can get a handle on. But if you don't continually monitor and go after illegal activity in the county, then it's going to continue because people know you can do it there. So I'm really excited about this and look forward to the opportunity. Hope it can go forward as fast as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bernie.
That was a great presentation, by the way. Thank you very much. I think you really gave us a sense of color, the depth of this and the complications of this issue. I have a friend that's a commissioner of a water board in Southern California. This problem has escalated so much there with drought and water shortages. And predominantly in that area, they're indoor illegal operations. They're mafias from different countries. And for the water commissioners to take any kind of enforcement activity has led to threats on their lives. So I think we're trying, correct me if I'm wrong, to get a little bit ahead of that. But at the same time, when I hear you, sir, I also hear that if this is happening all across the state, it might raise the level a little, but these people are still going to find ways, right? So do you think this is, given the flow of Jackson, Josephine County, and I've read countless articles on exactly what you were talking about, given the experience I shared that I'm aware of with my friend, what do you anticipate even with this? What do you see in the future? Or do you see this as just starting to develop an infrastructure of enforcement in order to just do what we can? I mean, it's not going to solve the problem.
I think two things we really want to accomplish. One is Lane County has a reputation for having zero ability to address this, whereas Jackson, Josephine, Douglas are addressing it. So we want to change that. We want to move from zero to something above zero. That's number one priority. And number two would be then to position ourselves as those southern counties did, should additional funding be available from the state, to be able to demonstrate that we've started a program, we've had some success, and with additional resources, we could do more. So I think that's how we see this in the short term. I think that the greater question is the long term, and I don't have a good answer for that because we already have seen a change of tactics in the southern counties to make it more difficult. having enforcement cause the other side to change their tactics. And so they're still doing good work, but it's becoming more labor intensive. Thus, the southern counties were quite successful in this grant application.
Thank you, Sheriff. I know we're tight on time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernie. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for applying for and receiving this grant. This is such important work. We mince words a little bit sometimes. We make references to human trafficking and all that. This is modern slavery. Let's make no mistake about it. They take these people illegally over our borders, confiscate all their documentation, and force them to work in these facilities in horrid conditions. Bad sanitation, horrible working conditions. It's slavery. And at the same time, it's also environmentally extremely destructive. And there are root causes to this that are outside of our control. And this little bit of enforcement effort is not going to stop it while there's so much profit to be made by these organized crime cartels. And our lack of border security that allows the trafficking and the markets that are developed from states that don't believe in liberty and freedom of choice and have kept marijuana illegal so the price is high enough to make this trafficking effort worth it are what's driving this problem. And we'll be able to swat a few, whack-a-mole here and there locally, but it's going to continue to happen as long as we have no southern border and as long as we have places in the U.S. that continue to have marijuana as an illegal drug and we keep it as a class 1 drug in the federal system. That's what drives the value. So, if we would accept, adults' responsibility to make their own decisions about their bodies, et cetera. And if we would deal with the southern border a little bit, we wouldn't need this grant. So hopefully, though, at least we will stop some of the slavery. We'll get, a few whack-a-moles here and there, and we'll help some folks that have been victimized. And I really appreciate reaching out to the services and, handling these. When you come in on a actual bust with a warrant, you're going to need people there trained in trauma-informed care because these people have been severely traumatized. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I just know how under-resourced our sheriff's department is compared to the average in the state, which is far below the resources across the country as far as public safety goes. So really appreciate the work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Then just a couple of quick things. Years ago, I worked at a little tiny hardware store in West Eugene. Jerry's became a big store later. At the time, we used to sell lots and lots of rolls, 300-foot rolls of 1.25-inch non-NSF poly pipe. And you mentioned, Captain Mann, that Lane County is a pretty good growing environment for marijuana. That was back when marijuana sold for $10 an ounce, I think is what it sold for and still people were growing back then for the limited amount of profit that was made. And understandably, the environment's still the same and people aren't siphoning water with 300-foot rolls of irrigation pipe that they used to buy at Jerry's. Back then we had about 5 customers and there were probably 4 of them. So thanks for the work. Thanks for pushing all this forward. And it's really interesting to see how things evolve, but things stay the same, don't they? Tactics have to change. And you talk about the southern counties evolving their tactics because of the stepping up of enforcement. We'll keep track of that because, as Commissioner Bozovich says, you are under-resourced. We know that. Sheriff, you want to go from 0 capability to some capability in this area. We understand that. But, I'm going to point this out. Over the course of the last week, the Sheriff's Department has successfully investigated murder cases, successfully solved auto theft. And now I'm hearing about making efforts to solve water theft, environmental issues, human trafficking, and human rights issues. The breadth of work that the Sheriff's Department does is just unfathomable to those of us standing and watching from the outside. So a salute to you and thank you very, very much. From the board, anything else on the topic before I take a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Then I'll call on Commissioner Bernie for a motion.
I propose resolution and order 22-07-19-04 in the matter of accepting a grant award from Oregon Criminal Justice Commission in the amount of $1 $1,927,601.08 over 3 years, et cetera. Thank you, Chair.
Moved by Commissioner Berney, seconded by Commissioner Buck. Any discussion to the motion? I'm seeing none at this time. Once again, thank you very much before we pass this motion. And I would say that well, I've got a lot to say. We'll say it later. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chief, Sergeant, thank you very much. Mr. Rickoff, we are moving forward with the next item on our agenda, which is a schedule for 40 minutes. I've been in contact with Mr. Fox, who's the executive director of our 1030 time certain, which is Homes for Good. And I see Shar and Jasmine are in the room right now. Oh, excuse me. I see the chair of the board is in the room. So we'll with indulgence, we can go a little bit beyond our 1030 time certain. I think if we try to be as concise as we can, but don't take any shortcuts. Let's do this to its fullest, Director Hurley. And Mr. Rickoff, I'll turn this over to you to introduce the panel.
Well, let me just quickly turn it over to Dan Hurley, Director of Public Works.
1 second here. I must have missed a step here. To share my screen here to folks. While Devin's getting that going, I'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Chair Farr, and good morning, Commissioners. It gives me great pleasure to give you an update on our Parks Levy. Unfortunately, our Parks Division Manager, Brett Henry, is out sick today. So you've got second string here today with me, but I'm joined by Jordan Carlson. He wears many hats at Parks, but one of those is to look at our financial planning and maybe able to answer more detailed questions if I get stuck here. So again, thank you for your time today to present some ideas about the potential Lane County Parks Levy with the aim to create a dedicated, stable, and affordable funding stream for investing in our valuable outdoor areas. We're here today to present a list of special projects that would be funded by the levy if approved by you and, of course, the voters of Lane County. These key investments are geographically dispersed throughout the county and reflect input we received from the public, stakeholders, staff, and yourselves. In your packet is the background on how we came to develop this levy to present to the board, to the voters. What I would like to do is to talk to you briefly about the need for this levy and the ways we have worked to develop a collaborative and compelling proposal for your feedback before we take the next steps to present this to the voters. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but it bears repeating that funding for Lane County Parks has been decimated through the 40 years of decreasing tax dollars and needing to make difficult decisions for priorities from very limited county funds. Cuts have been made over the years, and our parks assets have suffered because of the inability to invest to maintain them adequately. The analogy I use is a large home repair, such as replacing a roof. The cost is very expensive and not something that homeowners want to do. But at some point, the need to pay for this investment in order to protect the home or the main asset is needed. We are at that point to pay for our parks. As you know, Lane County Parks Department receives no property tax funding, which leaves our much appreciated and used properties without consistent funding to support parks operations and repairs. This has led to a tremendous need for critical repairs, upgrades, and investments to create safe, secure, and enjoyable environments for the taxpayers. Public parks are a critical part of the quality of life in Lane County. They provide affordable access to recreational opportunities for community members and visitors from outside of Oregon. We are very proud that our Lane County parks are local and accessible to all county residents and provide an easy way to get outside close to home. And today our parks are in higher demand than ever before. One thing that came out of the pandemic was a clear picture that our community members use our parks with high intensity. Our parks are generating increased visits from local residents who need outdoor places that are affordable, safe, and give them the opportunity to be in some of the most beautiful places in Lane County. Add to that the physical and mental health benefits of being outdoors, and you have a very real and beneficial part of the services that Lane County government provides to our residents, community members, and visitors. We clearly recognize that many of the original investments in our parks, which are more than 50 years old, have outlived their lifespan. The need for modernization, upgrades, and investments to bring all the parks back to what makes sense is why we are looking to ask for voters for this investment in the future of our parks. All you have to do is visit the restrooms in many of our parks, and you quickly recognize that modernization and upgrades are critically needed. In addition, we have opportunities to provide education about our environment for the residents into the future. Sorry, my notes have gotten blurry. I don't know what happened there. Oh, there we go. Our parks manager, Brett, unfortunately is out today, but has been guiding this process along with our consultant, well-known in parks, Bob Kiefer. And I want to talk to you about some of the innovative things we have done in putting together this proposal for projects and investments. First, we are looking to use some of the funding from the levy to seed investments with other partners, such as government organizations, private organizations, and nonprofits. By finding partners who can co-invest in projects, we are creating synergies and better return on investments for the taxpayers. Second, we are looking at ways where we could use some of the dollars to help partner with other internal county departments to gain services at decreased cost. For instance, one issue we hear often is surrounding the safety of our parks, as evidenced by Commissioner Farr's story about his friend and the auto theft today. In this proposal, we are looking to invest and partner with the Lane County Sheriff's Department to provide increased funding for patrols and deputies to increase safety at our parks. Third, we believe that strongly when voters trust us with investments that they approve through a levy, we must honor that trust and make reports back to the community through regular audits at these investments. Thank you for your time, attention, and guidance in developing the proposal for this levy. We'll look forward to your comments at the end of the presentation. And with your help, we can create something that will be supported by the voters and create positive connections for residents to Lane County for years to come. These investments will be critical for the future of Lane County parks, and we look forward to your feedback. All right, my first slide here for you is just a breakdown of the levy. As discussed in the previous presentation, what we are proposing, which was the preferred option by our Parks Funding Task Force, is a 5-year levy at 16 cents per $1,000 assessed property value. This would generate approximately $6 million in annual additional funding. Total funding over the life of the levy would be $30 million. Below that, there's a proposed allocation of how these funds would be used. So about $12.9 million for park investments and improvements to facilitate use. There was a list of these projects in the previous presentation, and that won't be the focus of this presentation. Increased operational support for maintenance and services and staffing for parks to the tune of $11.3 million. And then special projects, $5 million. This is the list of projects generated by community input, and that'll be the focus of the presentation today. And then finally, $700,000 to advance conservation education and enhance the user experience. With our limited staffing with parks, we have not had the bandwidth to offer programming that other parks divisions, departments do elsewhere around the community and the state and nationally. Here's a quick timeline of how we got to this point and where we're going from here. I'll talk at the end. Back in December 2018, the board approved our Parks Master Plan that was a decade or more in the making. And we were very happy to have unanimous support from the board in adopting that plan. In July of 2019, the board assigned the county administrator to create a Parks Funding Task Force to research and recommend a sustainable funding plan to the board. Despite the COVID interruption in 2020, the Parks Funding Task Force met a total of 10 times over a period of 17 months. And on October 9th of last year, Parks presented the task force preferred recommendation. Again, the preferred recommendation is a 5-year, $6 million annual levy. The Parks Funding Task Force also recommended $500,000 a year in general fund, but given the constraints on the general fund, that was not being proposed at our last meeting. At the meeting last month, Parks also presented the public polling results. Polling of likely voters in Lane County indicated 61% support for the preferred option. The board directed Parks to continue to pursue plans toward the local option levy. And here's where we'll get into the special projects. Again, the proposal includes $5 million in special projects. This project list was developed from feedback received from regional community engagement meetings, stakeholder interviews, and the findings from 2 public polling surveys. Improvements also include, as discussed, increased site security, which was often voiced as a concern in our parks due to break-ins at the trailheads, homeless camps, various criminal activities that have advanced with the increased use in our parks. Improvements also include some large facility improvements, which are listed there, which include expansion of the Armitage Campground, which is one of our most popular facilities, and a public restroom at the North Trailhead at Howard Buford Park or Mount Pisgah. Improving the parking lot, adding restrooms, and improving beach access at North Jetty Park. And we have $500,000 for trail improvements at Howard Buford Recreation Area, including new trails, accessibility improvements, trail maintenance, and kiosks. As you are aware, HBRA, as we call it, or Mount Pisgah is the beloved gem of the park system, and trails are well used. And then, sorry, I can't see with these notes. Okay, $750,000 for site security. That would be pooling funds with other areas of public works that utilize the sheriff's office to advance more of a presence and response in our county parks. So this slide shows the geographic location of some of those projects that are special projects. It also includes Baker Bay, which wasn't on the special projects list, but it would be funded out of that other 25 million. It's known that we need to make some significant improvements in investments into the campground there. Continuing on, we have a list of what we're calling cooperative projects. These are projects where funding would be used to partner with other agencies and organizations. These projects would allow Lane County Parks to enhance collective investments towards recreation, habitat conservation, and environmental education. These include a contribution to the McKenzie River Discovery Center for their interpretive building, funding to help restore Blue River Park, which was damaged from the Holiday Farm Fire, and an investment towards a regional pickleball facility at Lane Community College, which you heard about during public testimony this morning. And I just got a text from our Human Resources Director that there's a good article that people should look at if they aren't familiar with pickleball. It's an article from the New Yorker that says, "Can Pickleball Save America?" It has some unique features unique experiences for uniting people across ages, across ability levels, and hopefully across ideology. So I haven't got the chance to read that, but it sounds like a fun article. Yes, also in our cooperative projects, we have habitat restoration projects. We partner with the Friends of Buford Park out at Mount Pisgah and would like to support their work in improving the habitat. We have a habitat management plan and need funds to advance that plan. And also with the McKenzie River Trust, with a large restoration project called Bin Rock Reach as they advance that. Also $500,000 for environmental education. Mount Pisgah Arboretum is a strong partner out there at Mount Pisgah. And we would like to be able to contribute to their work to provide an environmental educator, offer bilingual interpretive walks, and provide low-income youth scholarships. And this slide here shows geographic distribution on those projects. On these, you'll notice it's primarily central to Eugene Springfield, which is the central population of Lane County, but we also have some projects up in McKenzie to support for these habitat restoration projects. Also in the special projects list are water access improvements. Feedback from the community meetings and public polling stressed the need to improve water access from improved boat ramps to facilities like restrooms and parking. We've allocated $850,000 to provide matching dollars, which would be a 25% match to 75% funded by the Oregon State Marine Board to advance these key boat landing improvements. And some of these would also include a transfer to, after the improvements are made, a transfer to other agencies, which would reduce the operational burden on Lane County parks. There were 11 locations chosen throughout Lane County. And as you see in this map, that each region has a landing which would receive one of these major improvements, except for the Middle Fork, which Lane County does not currently have a water access park in that region. So that concludes the presentation on this proposed special projects list. We'll welcome any feedback and direction from the board that you would wish to share on the proposed levy. Before hearing your feedback, I would like to show our next steps, actually, and then we'll go back there. So the next, we'll be back to the board 2 more times. The first would be on August 2nd. We would need the board to appoint a committee to prepare an explanatory statement that would go in the voters pamphlet. And then we would come back on August 9th with a public hearing at 1:30 with the request to the board to place the local option levy on the November 8th ballot. That concludes my presentation. And at this point, I would love to hear your questions, feedback. This would be the sort of the last opportunity to change around the special projects or the distribution of funding and any input on the language that we would bring for the levy when we return on August 9th.
Thank you, Director Hurley. Before I go to the board, I'll mention that to the folks in the audience who are here for our 10:30 time certain, we are running a little bit behind schedule. Ms. Kubak, if you could explain to everyone and Chair Revis, we may be 10 minutes or so behind. I've been in contact with the Executive Director, Jacob Fox. So my apologies, heartfelt apologies for that. Then Mr. Rickoff will move down move up to the board for questions. But first, I'm going to say that USA Today recently published a top 15 things to do while you're here in Eugene for the 2022 World Games. On that top 15 list was Fern Ridge and Lane County parks, and the top 15 things to do in the region. We can elaborate on that, but they did list our parks, which is a pretty wonderful thing. And I'm going to take a moment to talk about Orchard Point, Perkins Peninsula, Richardson, Zumwalt, even Zumwalt, which is a semi-mothballed park. One of the top 15 things to do if you're here from England or from whatever part of the world you may be here from. So to the board for questions, comments. Commissioner Bozevich.
I hate to be the only person that's not super enthusiastic. I've managed assets for, the water system that serves this city. So I understand the need, and I really appreciate the project list. I am still extremely concerned about the timing of doing this. We have such a critical levy we have to renew next May. And I think we just had the sheriff's office in here where we're actually begging for money to try and do minimal enforcement of illegal marijuana grows. We only got less than half of what we asked for. I spent yesterday more than an hour meeting with the PSCC Budget Committee, looking at the crisis that's coming to our supervision of offenders and our ability to track people pre-trial. I have to think about, as I'm thinking about asking the voters to support revenue for Lane County, what are the highest priority services I want to make sure we fund first? And parks is a very important service, but public safety right now, because it relates to so many things, because our public safety system has become our de facto mental health system in this county, and is already so under-resourced. 0.19 sheriffs per 100,000. I forget what the number is exactly. Where Marion and Clackamas County are at 0.36. Just to give you an idea of basically twice the number of sheriff's deputies we have. We shouldn't be patting ourselves on the back because we solved a murder and we solved a property crime. We should be patting ourselves on the back when we prevent those in the first place. And when we're doing enough to intervene in people's criminal histories before they get to the felony level. And we're just not doing that in this county. And I know there was a survey question that kind of said this wasn't going to have an impact. It was a poorly written question. It was a double, where you're asking people to do two sets of what ifs. If this passes, would you be still willing to renew the levy? So they had to think twice of that's not something you normally do in a survey. And talking with survey professionals, they're not so sure that's a very accurate read. I'm also concerned that as we're sitting on 10% inflation rate, people are going to get awful stingy about granting taxes in the future as their family budgets are getting eaten up with rent increases, which we're predicting high rent increases based on House Bill 2001's limitations. With the inflation rate of 7% and the 9%, they're looking at possible 16% rent increases. There's just so much pressure on people's pocketbooks right now. So I am having an extreme difficulty in thinking about asking the voters for money or parks ahead of us renewing I can't tell you what will happen to Lane County's public safety system if we don't renew the public safety levy. And the problem is the sheriff's already giving in to just asking for the 55 cents over again because he's afraid that if he asks for what he really needs, which would probably be the 55 plus the 16 we're asking for parks, just to keep even with cost increases he's dealing with. That's the issue there. So for me, I have to think about what are the highest priority services Lane County offers and is doing. And public safety system and our mental health system and trying to do, housing and other issues just go ahead of parks for me. And I know there's, it's a very popular thing. It's probably going to pass, but we'll use up that much more of the goodwill of the voters. As we start into a huge inflationary spiral, which is not going to end immediately, we printed too much money. And then next May, we're going to be asking for people to tax themselves again. So as much as I absolutely understand the need for this, understand the capital needs, the maintenance needs, I fully support the project list, I have difficulty supporting the timing. So I'd like to ask the board to pump their brakes and think about doing this next November. And at that point, I think it makes sense. But I think you would be wise to ask the voters for public safety first.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Moving along, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. As the other rural commissioner, I can completely appreciate the issue with public safety that has been an ongoing issue for long before I became a commissioner. I am pleased to see that there is public safety money that's included in these special projects lists. I think that's very helpful. I've heard about that issue in my district quite a bit. And I think just having an additional presence of people that are going around and driving from these places in conjunction with the sheriff's office is going to be a huge help. And make sure that people feel safe when they're at our campgrounds as well. And yes, we do critically need to pass that public safety levy. I think it will pass. The sheriff's office has been doing a fantastic job at what they do each and every day. It's a very popular levy. Last time that it passed, it has been some time. And yes, there is inflation issues. I do feel like it will still be successful, and I'll do whatever I can as a commissioner to use my platform in order to help move that levy along. It's also part of the issues through COVID is that we need people to get out into the community, help them relieve their mental health stress in the last few years, utilize our parks, get out there, utilize our boat ramps, get on the water, have fun, get active again. And really find a place for families and friends and those that actually travel from other counties in the state to utilize our parks. I've heard and talked with some people who've contacted me about Baker Bay specifically. It is in such desperate need of some upgrades there. And they have parks in their own county, but they specifically travel down here to Lane County to utilize our parks because they just like the ambiance and the way that our parks are set up. And that's wonderful to hear. And I want to make sure they keep coming down here, spending some time here, spending a little money, and take advantage of what we have. I'm really excited about the list of special projects in my East Lane district. There are quite a few, and I think that's going to go a long way for voters in East Lane. It's not unusual for voters in rural communities to really shy away from additional taxes, right? It's not unusual. They want to be out there away from a lot of things, but they really appreciate the natural resources in the rural community. And that's what attracts them there. It's what attracts other people around the state to come here, and they're very protective of their waters, their streams, their parks, and other things that they utilize every day in rural communities. And if they knew the amount of special projects that are on this list to go and be slated for improvement in East Lane, I think that might allow them to think twice and go, oh, actually, this may really improve our area. And I've been wanting to see X, Y, and Z improve for so long, but there's never been an opportunity to find resources to do this. So this is really exciting to me. I really like the list that's come along. I know there's been hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteer hours that have gone into putting this together to present it here today. I want to appreciate everybody who's been on the Parks Committee, all those people that came out to talk about what they would like to see as improvements in our park. It's a very popular topic. And I think this will pass. And I wouldn't change anything on it. I think the way that presented is really well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Vice Chair Trigger, followed by Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of time, and I understand you really do need feedback on the list, and then whether we're to move forward, and there'll be plenty more time at a public hearing and a first reading, and then likely a second to talk more specifically. But I will just say I agree with Commissioner Bozovich about the concerns, but I arrive at a different conclusion. I don't think I think if we frame this as pick one, public safety or parks, we are engaging in a race to the bottom that we don't simply need to, and it doesn't make any sense for us. This agency, this county provides so many services, and different people value different ones for different reasons. And our job as leaders in the community is to talk the community through the benefit to any number of the services we provide and the mechanisms and tools that we have at our disposal, and why we're using them as a way to fund those services. So I think it's up to us to not frame this as pitting parks against public safety. When I look at the survey, and I see the top reason people don't vote to support things like tax levies is an overall sense of too many taxes, not about what they're going to. And the other is whether they trust the government to be good stewards of the resource. And I think us being good stewards of the resource of our park system is getting as close as we can to adequately funding it. And I think people understand that and appreciate that. And the same is true of our public safety system. So our jobs as commissioners is to talk to the constituents of Lane County and explain why both of these levies matter, and how they are responding to what we're hearing constituents express as their needs. So we are not imposing the levy. We are giving the voters the opportunity to impose it on themselves. And then our job becomes how we talk to them about how that matters and what good stewards will be of those resources. I looked back at historic data from the 2013 original public safety levy, and then the renewal in 2017. And the margin by which it passed was overwhelming. And when I say I'm not concerned about passing the renewal, it doesn't mean, and so we don't have work to do to ensure that happens again. I'm saying that it demonstrates that when we do the work and make the compelling case, the voters understand and join us. So I looked at, in 2013, it passed by a margin of over 11,000 votes in favor. over those opposing, and 31, almost 32,000 was the differential for the renewal. So I just don't think we need to make this a zero-sum game. And I have talked with the sheriff personally and let him know that he can fully count on me to be supportive in May of talking, particularly with Eugene voters, about the benefit to them of the public safety levy, because that can sometimes be seen as a disconnect since they have EPD serving their households. And finally, what I would say, as far as I want to echo Commissioner Buck's appreciation to the many, many community members who participated in the funding task force and ongoing in our Parks Advisory. And as far as the question of delay, because of the deferred maintenance and how far behind we are, we're only making that gap between our needs and the resources to meet them grow the longer we delay. And so I don't think that demonstrates good stewardship and good fiscal responsibility. And so I'm in favor of moving forward. I'm looking forward if we can move us into the next stage to hearing more public comment and having more discussion, and appreciate all your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trieger. Commissioner Burney.
If I can get this frog out of my throat, I would like to say that the slide I like most in your presentation is the one that's currently up there. I'm sorry. Unlike Commissioner Bozovich, I have faith that the voters can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think that this is as a member of the board liaison to the Parks Advisory Committee, and as a commissioner whose district really would be least impacted, Springfield has a thriving parks district, Willamette, and we are so proud of our parks. And yet, the past chair of the Willamette board, as you know, Mr. Hurley, is who I've appointed to help draft the statement, and he's fully supportive of this, as is Mayor Van Gordon. I've spoke with them both a lot. I think that to talk about pumping the brakes now and presupposing how voters will vote instead of allowing them to vote is inappropriate. In fact, I recall last week we were discussing the psilocybin issue, and we all kind of agreed that, hey, if the voters voted to approve this, who are we not to allow that to occur? I think that and also I must say that as someone who's going to stay in this state and stay in this county and absolutely wants the priorities for enforcement, for public safety, for education, for healthy people, for a healthy environment, et cetera, there are so many areas where, yes, resources are scarce. You have been diligently working on this. You've been coordinating with the board ever since I've been a commissioner. I enthusiastically look at moving this forward, and I enthusiastically do not look at this at all conflicting. I, by the way, did some calculations, and my home that's probably worth about $750,000. It's appraised for $400,000. This would cost me $64 a year. I have no issue with moving this forward and allowing the voters to make a decision for themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair Burney. Further discussion from the board? Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I first want to just ask some clarifying questions. The 750,000 that's in there for security improvements, you said was a pool. So that's coming from, I believe that's also public roads and waste management for some security and Waymaster, et cetera. How much of that 750,000 is actually coming out of the levy fund?
Good question, Commissioner. All of it would. Roads would be putting in their piece. It's a conversation we're just starting with the sheriff, how we could get more coverage throughout the day into the evening. Right now, the roads division contracts for a Waymaster. We would also love to see more support for, we don't have a traffic team for Lane County. There's a grant available from the state right now where we could pay for deputies' time for traffic enforcement. But the sheriff's been reluctant to go for that because there are the costs for the car and training the deputy up. But if we could pool our resources here, I think we could have another deputy that could act as a backup waymaster, that could have a presence out in the parks, could address the issues at the transfer stations, and serve a variety of needs within the county.
I also understand that 750,000 is including work crew, not actual deputy support.
Yes, potentially, Commissioner. The sheriff's work crew needs a deputy to coordinate that work, and so potentially for projects where we need to clean up and a homeless camp area, for example, that the work crew could be out there with the deputy support.
Thanks. So I just want to, I know that I'm probably a lone voice on this, but I just want to note that the lack of resources for both parks and the sheriff started with the federal government discontinuing their responsibility for our O&C lands. And that lack of funding from the federal government, which built our park system. I mean, the surpluses that we were running when we were harvesting timber from our federal lands are what built this park system. And that lack of that federal component is why we're short revenue and why we had to make the cuts we made and why we've been years and years and years of lack of public safety. And it was a struggle to get the folks that would like that timber harvest to come back, and also our major property taxpayers, not to be run a no campaign against the first sheriff's levy, because they didn't want to see the problem solved. They wanted the pressure on the federal government of failing counties and not shifting a federal responsibility to local taxpayers. I spent a lot of political capital preventing that no campaign and keeping them on board for the renewal. Recently, our board has walked away from supporting federal timber harvest, and I am almost positive we are going to see a healthy no campaign against this levy. In fact, I know there's one coming, because we're not supporting that replacement of federal revenues with local tax from our homeowners, including our senior citizens.
Commissioner Bozievich, we are in a real rush to get on with our.
But I'm just saying, understand the issue here. Understand you might have a survey that says 61% now. That's not post a heavily funded no campaign. So I just want to give warning. If we really should stick with a priority where we can actually convince people that there's let's keep our public safety system together. Let's at least agree to that, and then do parks afterwards. And then maybe next year, and there might be a change in the majority of this board and they're supporting that federal issue, there wouldn't be a no campaign against the parks levy. I'm just saying, be careful of your timing. I hope the board considers that. I know I'm in the minority.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozievich. I don't have much time to say the things that I wish to say at this point in time. Other than this, we'll be back on August 2nd and again on August 9th to further discuss this. The public has demonstrated that they trust Lane County by the passage of the sheriff's levy twice now. In the last 7 years, we've had our Moody's rating, our bond rating upgraded 2 times. People have reason to trust Lane County. Director Hurley, it's incumbent on me as a supporter of moving forward with the parks levy. It's incumbent on me to make sure that the people continue to trust Lane County. And having strong parks is one reason that people do trust Lane County, because of the forward-facing presentation that we have in our parks. I'll talk more about that when the time comes. And I will also say this, Commissioner Bozievich, you're not the lone voice when it comes to talking about the federal government abdicating their responsibility when they did not cover the loss of money from the timber harvests. So you're not the lone voice on that. That being said, anything further from the board? Mr. Hurley, I believe you have everything you need from us today. This was not an action item, just a discussion item. We'll be looking for some action potentially on August 2nd and on August 9th. To the people in the audience, I apologize for the delay. Mr. Hurley, thank you very much. Director Hurley, thank you very much for the presentation, and we will see more of you. Thank you. Then with great haste, we'll move forward with our 10:30 time certain, 15 minutes late. And it burns me to be late for a time certain, but I'll ask the Mr. Rickoff, I'm going to ask you to introduce the panel, but today I know that Director Fox is here virtually. Executive Director Fox, I believe, will be here virtually. And we have some of the folks we're going to be talking about a little bit are in the audience today. And I believe that we should ask Ms. Kubak to come forward, potentially, and Chair Revis to come forward. Mr. Rickoff, at this point, I'm going to turn this over to you. We'll be moving on. Let's see, it is a, excuse me, I'm going to name it by actual name. It's Order 22-07-1905 in the matter of appointing Homes for Good Housing Agency's board members. And once again, Jacob Fox will be with us virtually. And Mr. Rickoff, this is a big moment. I started talking about this 10 years ago when I first joined the board of Homes for Good. And Chair Revis, you're the only member of the board who's been on that board longer than I have. So that longer than I and Commissioner Bozevich has actually been on that board longer. But to you, Mr. Rickoff.
Chair Farr, Commissioners, thank you. I'm hoping that we can get Jacob Fox up on the screen. I see his photo there.
Up on the very top, yeah, top center.
He's there in the very top. And so, Jacob, I'm not sure how you want to proceed. Do you want to go ahead and make some comments?
Sure. So I think what we wanted to do was start with our current board chair, Shar Revis, who wants to just acknowledge the role of the Lane County Commissioners in serving as the Homes for Good board and also, helping facilitate this change in governance. So Shar, I'll just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, Chair Farr and Commissioners. I just think that we have been on an amazing journey. We have done so much with housing, all of us together, even through COVID, even through virtual groundbreaking and grand openings. And we've all worked together. And I just totally, really appreciate how much all of you were, committed as Homes for Good commissioners and Lane County commissioners to make that happen. And I just, with all my heart, and want to tell all of you how much I appreciate everything that you've done and your willingness to move on to begin another journey with a new journey, I should say, continuing new journey. And I just want to kind of go through and I want to thank everyone for how much you treated both Commissioner Thurston and myself as equals, and you listened to us. And that didn't always happen on the board in the very beginning with other people that aren't here now. And I just want you all to know how much that meant to us and how that helped us grow and be leaders in the community. And I don't know, I can't say enough about that, and I just want to say thank you personally. Thank you, Commissioner Burney, for being supportive. Thank you for making sure I didn't fall on the ground one time when my legs just decided not to. And we're walking behind Commissioner Thurston and myself. I appreciate that. Commissioner Buck, thank you for always being supportive. And I also want to thank you so much for the first time in history, when two appointed commissioners who were residents spoke against a motion or a board order that was coming through. You listened to us and you spoke up and said, I think we need to send this back. And that was momentous to me because it had never happened before, because you heard what Commissioner Thurston and I were saying about it not being quite right. And thank you so much for that. And I'm leaving you, Chair Farr, to last. Thank you, Commissioner Trigger, for reaching out to me right after you became a Lane County Commissioner and invite me out to coffee so we could get to know each other. I really appreciated that. And it was great getting to know you and for supporting me this year as the Vice Chair of the Homes for Good Board. And Commissioner Bozovich, you've always been there for me and had to step in on a family emergency several times when you were the vice chair of our Homes for Good. And I totally appreciate that. I appreciate how quickly you helped work with me to get all of our people who lived in housing in Florence their library cards back when a new law was passed that said that nobody that if you were living in a place that didn't pay property taxes, that you could not have a library card, you had to pay. And I just like quickly emailed Jay and went, what the heck is going on here? And it was just some kind of glitch because of the housing that we own in Florence. So anyway, thank you, Jay, and always being supportive. And then Pat, there's you, Chair Farr. You've been a mentor. You've just helped me so much learn and grow, and I appreciate it. And Commissioner Thurston as well, you always let us come into your office when we were meeting upstairs and wait and get ready for the meeting. And you've just been there, and just like, you know, I just want you to appreciate that. So, I mean, there's so many things I can say. I just don't know what else to say except for thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you for considering this new board. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jacob to discuss our new board. You want to do the words first? Okay.
I see more than one board.
I know, right?
And please know these plaques that are being handed out now, we will take a moment afterwards to make sure we have a photograph of you all with these absolutely beautiful and impressive plaques.
Can I ask, are these from the tree, from the sequoia? Got it.
Every tree is special.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you. But we will make sure we get a picture.
I would like to say that I'm sorry that Commissioner Thurston was unable to be here, and I believe she was online. I hope she still is. So, and I did want to say thank you to Commissioner Thurston as well. I forgot, and I didn't mean to. I don't have notes in front of me. Wow, she's done an amazing job, and she's become an incredible leader and works on housing in many different areas, and is doing amazing. And I want everyone to remember that, how much she's grown in just 4 years. So thanks.
Thank you, Chair Rivas.
Great. So I'll just step back in and kind of talk specifically about what we're asking the Lane County board members to deliberate on today. One of the things I'll lead with is the partnership and relationship between the county and Homes for Good as Lane County's public housing authority is exceptional. When I talk to other jurisdictions, both in the state of Oregon and across the nation, there just isn't the partnership that exists between those two governmental entities. And I would say that partnership really was a thread throughout this transition. So I worked extensively with Greg Rickoff and Steve Dingle and our legal counsel, Ross Williams, on sort of the legal and technical aspects of this transition, and just really want to thank Greg and Steve Dingle for just all their support, their good ideas, and just their assistance in navigating through this process. The application process was robust. We asked a lot of the applicants, and it was really just compelling the time that applicants took in filling out their applications, how they thought about home, what home meant for them as humans, and also just their vision for how we can create more homes for people in need in our community. So we received a total of 30 applications, and we selected 10 applicants to go through interviews. Greg Rickoff during the process was reassigned or taken on new duties. So Steve Adams was actually part of the selection committee along with myself, Shar Revis, and Lori Trieger. We had one heck of a long day. I think it was Friday, June 24th, and interviewed 10 different applicants. And then we agreed by consensus as to who that we're recommending for appointment today. So I want to extend my appreciation and respect to Michelle Thurston, Joel Aboa, Justin Sandoval, Larissa Ennis, Chloe Tarabasso, and Kurt Stroman Jr. just for the time that you took to apply. You all are super busy professionally and personally, and taking the time to apply for our board, I know was a big lift, and also, taking time to do the interviews. And just really their professional passion, their vision for the future of our agency, and the deep caring that came through both their applications and interviews is why we're recommending this kind of slate of appointed commissioners to the Lane County Board. So with that, I'll conclude my overview of the process and my appreciation for all the super great humans that assisted, and I can take any comments or questions from the board.
Thank you, ED Fox, Executive Director Fox. I'll call you Mr. Fox. We're looking at Order 2207-1905. So let's have a discussion toward the order that we have in place. And I'll begin with Commissioner Trieger.
Would you like a motion, Chair, and then discussion of the motion?
We can start with the motion, absolutely.
Great. And before we do, I know Jacob's not feeling in top form, so left off his own staff member who was part of the interview team, Jose, and just I was going to appreciate the interview team and being included and involved in that. It was a great experience. So I will propose we move Order 22-07-19-05 in the matter of appointing Homes for Good Housing Agencies board members as listed in the packet.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck. And let's have some discussion to the motion. I'll call on the board in order. Commissioner Trieger, Vice Chair, Commissioner Buck.
I am excited on the new path that Homes for Good is taking. This is a pretty big deal today for this particular board. I also want to appreciate all the people who have applied and were interested in housing in our community. I am at my core a deep housing advocate, and so I appreciate people's interest in this subject. I know it's a big deal for us on our board as the Board of Commissioners, and we have all spent a great deal of time on the Homes for Good board, learning, exploring, finding new ways to do innovative housing in our community, trying to recover from natural disasters. I appreciate everything that the board is doing in response to the Holiday Farm Fire and other regions that just need housing in a very desperate way. It's kind of the end of the era in our board as it consisted, but it's very exciting to move on. And I celebrate the new members that are coming onto the board, and thank you all for being willing to step up. It's a volunteer position. You could be doing anything else with your time. But this is deeply needed in our community, and we need your expertise. And for those that are able to be on the board with lived experience, that's even more helpful for our community to learn from. I'm excited for us as a board. I'm excited for the Homes for Good agency, and look forward to all the new innovative housing options that we're going to see in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion. Commissioner Bozich.
Thank you. So I just want to explain my no vote. I have not been supportive of this change in the board from the beginning, because I feel we're abdicating a financial responsibility of a public agency. And there are many other examples where we actually use advisory boards, and then the actual financial and major decisions are made by the Lane County Commissioners. Public Safety Coordinating Council is a perfect example. I was just talking about meeting with the budget meeting yesterday. We make recommendations to the full PSCC, They make a recommendation to the board approves changes in that budget. So it has control. This is abdicating that financial and fiduciary responsibility to a broader thing on the basis of we didn't have enough time for this, 2 hours a month, which I did not feel was justified. I think we have plenty of time to deal with this and plenty of interest. The other portion of it was the expansion of the board. The idea was to get people that might be subject matter experts that could help the agency, people from the construction industry or banking, or that understood some of those things. As I look at the proposed slate, I see two people that meet that: somebody from banking, somebody that has knowledge of real estate transactions from the legal side. But then I see advocates and community activists, which don't really meet what I thought we were going to get. So I am not going to be voting yes on this, and I feel it would have been better to form maybe an advisory committee that reported to the Homes for Good board, and that would have been a better structure. But that's just my personal point of view, and I've advocated that all along this process.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burney.
First, sure, it's interesting of all the things you mentioned that I helped you when you were needing help with a mobility issue. See those crutches? It's your turn. While I support this, I agree with some of the concerns Commissioner Bozovich mentioned. And so I'm going to use this as an opportunity to at least articulate, and perhaps, Jacob, you could give some thought moving forward. The intent as it was described, I support this, absolutely. The intent as it was described, as I recall it being described to me, was to bring on additional professional expertise that would, in fact, provide pragmatic and tangible assistance, making things happen and supporting you, Jacob, and your team. And I also did not see that in this particular slate. I also saw community activists. I got nothing against community activists at all. I like to think I am one. But at the same time, I see a disconnect between the intent for part of the intent for doing this and then the slate that was chosen. Nonetheless, this is not a surprise, this move. There's been a great deal of organization drive. COVID interrupted it because I recall the first few months of being a commissioner. Jacob, you came to me with this. I think you really should take a lot of Commissioner Bozovich's and my points here as you move forward with a new board. But I absolutely support this evolution of the agency, because at the same time, housing is much more of an issue now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's been an issue eternally for those that have been homeless, or those that no matter what rents or mortgages were, couldn't afford them. But now we're in a situation where this is probably one of the major issues of our society. So Godspeed. I'll support this. I have concerns, but those concerns don't outweigh my support. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And without further discussion, I'll add a couple of things very quickly. Would you like to go before me? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make some comments to the motion, and then after we get through that business, would like to be in the queue again. I appreciate all the comments, and will just again state appreciation not only to the interview panel, but to everyone who applied. We heard during public comment earlier another example of someone who's experienced applying and not being appointed. It's a great problem to have that we get too many people applying to be on various boards and commissions, and then we have space for, and that happens everywhere, and this was no exception. I had the good fortune and the added benefit of being able to review the complete applications, not simply see the sort of few sentence encapsulation that's provided in the packet today about those that are seeking, that we're asking for appointment, but also to actually talk with the applicants. And so I have a little bit more of an understanding of the ways in which the folks that we interviewed do in fact fit the bill of bringing the needed deepened experience and perspective to this board that will help Jacob as the executive director and his staff as leaders of the organization fulfill the mission and do the work of the organization. I think words like expertise and professionalism can mean a lot of different things and can be manifested in a lot of different ways. And everyone that is listed in your packet as seeking appointment brings an absolutely valid and unique and important and needed set of experiences, expertise, perspective, and work style. I will also note that this is still the county's housing authority. So bottom line, literally and figuratively, issues will still come before us for a final set of T crossing and I dotting. So in terms of spending of public dollars and oversight, that's there with this body. Two final pieces. One is that a lot of conversation about this new structure also revolved around the ability then to have committees that are particularly content focused. So issues like real estate development, land use, building and construction, and so on. We are giving this organization an opportunity to be more expansive and more nimble and bring in more voices as they are needed on those particular issue and content areas. So I think we will see more of that to come. And the last thing I will say when it comes to just, is this the right move or not? One of, personally for me, what helps me often is to run something through what I call the flip the script narrative, which was, imagine if all along the proposal, the structure we're about to adopt and move forward with had always been the case, and we were actually being asked to pass an order and change it so that the board of our housing authority is 2 residents plus the 5 elected county commissioners, whoever they are, regardless of their interest in, commitment to, or experience with housing issues. Would that pass muster? Would we want to flip the script? Would we want to adopt an order that says, you know what, community's been involved, affected communities have been giving input, but we want to take that away and instead have it be this body plus 2 resident commissioners? Is that something we would do? And I don't think we would. I certainly wouldn't be supportive. So I'm very excited about this move. I think it gives us a housing authority that really is reflective of the community that it serves. And that's important. And again, really appreciate everyone's support and of me as being part of that interview process. It was rigorous. It was an entire day, plus in advance of that entire day, reviewing materials and conversations. And then of course, all of us as the current board working with Shar and Michelle and Jacob to get us to this point. So thank you. And I'm excited and appreciate everyone's time and effort.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Then I'll just add a couple of things very, very quickly. And Shar, you've been a beacon, a shining light for me. That's all I'm going to say right now. I've said lots and lots of other things that support what I've just said. So, you know, regarding the makeup of this board, and I'm going to look to you, Ms. Rickoff, and to you, Mr. Fox. As I mentioned, I've been advocating for a change in governance for a long time, understanding it would take a long time for us to get to this point in time. And one of the things that I did advocate for is, first off, not a majority of county commissioners being the deciding body. We will accomplish that with this move. The second thing that I wanted to accomplish personally, and what I want isn't necessarily what goes or what everybody else wants, but what I wanted was to have the expertise of people with technical abilities and technical knowledge on the board. We're partially achieving that with this slate that we're I predict we will appoint today. But what I'm going to mention to you, Mr. Fox, is that when I became executive director of Food for Lane County, I had a board, and the board had been kind of hand-selected through the years by the previous executive director, and it had gone away from a level of expertise in specific fields, specific areas. The board, after I became executive director of Food for Lane County, decided to revise its own constitution I don't mean the written constitution, but the constitution of the board. And they did that by looking at a matrix of positions that they would like to fill on the board from professional backgrounds. And they ultimately did that. And that's the way, to my understanding, Food for Lane County's board operates today. It was that board of directors that decided to revise its own content. I believe that the board of directors will have that opportunity, Mr. Fox, in the future to revise its own makeup. This, as we talked about during the preliminary stages of what led up to today, we talked about this being the initial board of the initial governance board for Homes for Good, and that this board will, I hope, continue to look at its makeup and continue to look at where do we need to have additional professional expertise directly on the board. I believe we have that option down the road. We being the Lane County Housing Authority, and will continue to be a part of that. And the other thing I'll say, Mr. Fox, is that I don't believe that we're abdicating as a board of county commissioners, that we're abdicating our responsibility for the fiscal impact of Food for Lane County, of Homes for Good. And the reason I say that is because any Lane County money that's spent by Homes for Good will ultimately come through the Board of County Commissioners for approval, and other things will come through us for approval. For instance, MLK Commons is on Lane County land, and other properties that we've developed are on Lane County land. We will always, as a Board of County Commissioners, us and subsequent boards, have thumbprints all over Homes for Good, and that's not going to go away. And I believe and I trust that. And I will say this, that the accomplishments of the Board of Homes for Good with the existent board have been phenomenal over the last 5 or 6 years, beginning with Bascom Village in my recollection, but also continuing. Recently, we're populating the Nell, our newest Homes for Good public housing, permanent supportive housing facility, and soon we'll be looking at the Bridges on Broadway for the same revised purpose. So we're moving forward. This is a step moving forward, and I'm really excited about it. So with that, any further discussion toward the motion? Mr. Rickoff, followed by Commissioner Burney.
Chair, for our commissioners, I know that Steve Adams was disappointed that he couldn't be with you today, and not so disappointed as he would change his plans to be in the UK with his family. But he was honored to be part of the selection panel and was very pleased with the slate, and asked me to convey his support for these selected individuals and his gratitude for being able to work with the committee that made this decision.
Brilliant and bravo. Thank you, Mr. Rickoff. Mr. Fox, before the vote, anything you'd like to add before I turn to Commissioner Burney? Sorry, Joe.
That's fine.
Not a lot, just that I'm listening, and one of the things that we've talked about is should the new, sort of the newly comprised Homes for Good board have joint work sessions with the Lane County board. So, like I said, the connection's never been stronger. It's really a best practice for me nationwide, the relationship that we've developed. We're rigorously regulated by HUD. We have the same auditors. We're a discreetly presented component of Lane County's financial statements. So again, I think in terms of partnership, it's there. In terms of regulatory and financial oversight, it's there. And we're just excited to continue to be in partnership with Lane County and the Lane County Board. And as Pat pointed out, this board may see some gaps in terms of, experience or perspective that we want on our board. And I think one of the ways that we can, address a gap is looking at our subcommittee structure. That subcommittee structure is going to be, sort of how we recruit and educate future board members. So yeah, just super excited about the new board structure, the folks that we're asking you to approve to be on it, and the continued connection with Lane County leadership and the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Commissioner Burney.
You may be Pat to Mr. Fox, but you're Chair to me. So thank you, Chair. I wanted to say, because this is sort of like a parting in a sense, a transition. I just wanted to indulge for one moment and say, one, Jacob, I really want to publicly acknowledge the risk you took and that the board took at my request, and I appreciate that, when you provided a $50,000 non-refundable security deposit for residents of the Patrician Manufactured Home Park, which enabled us, you, I, and the board, to keep that escrow going and to provide a model now for tenant ownership of a cooperative where tenants own their own manufactured home park. And I look forward to working with you because we're going to have legislation enabling that for manufactured home parks across the state of Oregon coming up. So thank you for that. I also, Chair, want to say that I couldn't agree with your comments more. I thought they were brilliant and bravo, but since you made me wait 2 times to say it, that doesn't have the gravity it would have if I spoke right after you. And finally, on a personal level, can you imagine how gratifying it's been for me to work with Commissioner Thurston, a high school student of my wife's at Cottage Grove High School, in what seems like another life? That's all, Chair. Thank you for the indulgence.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. And then Chair Rivas, anything you'd like to add before the vote?
No, I just think you guys had incredible comments, and I'm looking forward to your support in passing this motion.
With heart beating loud, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozievich in opposition. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we take a moment for a quick photograph?
Let's do that. And after which I'm going to call on, I believe that Commissioner Trigger has one more item to talk about regarding, before you leave the room. So,
hey, if you'll join them.
Are we coming down? Oh, you're coming up? Can we
go
do it
ahead,
up here so that
come on
Joe
up
doesn't
and
have to? Oh, I
go
see.
on
what
around
you're
and
doing.
stand together.
let me put my tie on.
Do you want to come around? Come on over. Come on up here,
Go
Joe.
on up. Yeah.
Oh, we should got a picture of that.
That's kind of
Quite
you.
fast enough.
I felt like
This is going to be a panoramic. Yeah.
Squeeze in. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Join me.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you all. Got you bored because you are a
my
board member. So that would. Thank you. Looks for good. Good.
Looks pretty good.
Hey.
You going to text that to us?
Thanks, Char.
Now, before we move along to County Council, I'm going to call on Commissioner Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to note in the new structure of Homes for Good, there are 2 board member Board of County Commissioner board reset. There are 2 seats for county commissioners, and we haven't as a board discussed a process, but I think in order to move that along, I think I would like to propose 2 commissioner names, and then I think Greg can correct me, or Diana, that what we can do is then get head nods and have a board order come back to the effect of what I'm about to present. But I would like to present to my colleagues the notion that we appoint Commissioner Buck as someone with that housing expertise and representing rural communities, and Commissioner Chair Farr as a Metro Center, and to provide that continuity and longevity on the Homes for Good board as the 2 county commissioners that serve on that board, and that we have them serve for a period of whatever the right number of months is to take them through calendar year 23. And that would then put us in a position starting in 24, where commissioner liaison and board appointment assignments align with in the course of our regular business. So 2-part, 1 is whether the 2 commissioners I'm proposing be our designees to this board accept that sort of nomination. And then if I have that right as to what the process would be, to have an order come back to us at the soonest possible next scheduled meeting to put that into effect for a period of time that lines up in the way I described.
We've had a sidebar Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Their Homes for Good is, again, part of my deeply held philosophy that housing is a human right. And they're doing such wonderful work in the McKenzie River region for the restoration of the Holiday Farm Fire for housing. And for those reasons, I would very much appreciate remaining on board.
Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. If I could make a suggestion, could that appointment be through into January when we normally make these board assignments? And then that way we can, the new board after January 1st can discuss and make all the appointments together.
My proposal, I would like my proposal to stand to have it go through calendar year 23 to provide that continuity and stability. That's the proposal I'm putting forward.
I'll have to vote no.
So looking for head nods to give you direction, Mr. Rickoff. I think you have them. No official vote on it, but so the vote would actually come when the order is presented.
Thank you, Chair. We'll move forward with that.
For what it's worth, Chair, I would like to be in the nod.
Thank you. I presume that. Ms. Jones.
If I may, I will bring this back as a board order that is an update to the order that Commissioner Burney or that Commissioner Bozovich had referenced. I will add this committee to the board order on standing committees that the board serves on, with the term to end on December of 2023, and so it will then come back in January of 2024 to reappoint 2 new commissioners. And I will put that on the agenda for August 2nd.
That is perfect, Ms. Jones. I'm going to point out that by rule, we can make amendments to orders once they come forward.
Yeah, and I will just note, please place that not on the consent calendar.
And that will not go on the consent calendar. Thank you. Very good. Then that concludes our business with Homes for Good today. Ms. Kubek.
Sorry, it was not going to speak today, but we do have a board meeting later next week on a Wednesday. So we'd love to have a full set of board members for that board meeting. So that's a little bit of a conundrum. So we have an officially already scheduled board meeting for Homes for Good.
So the full membership, whoever the 2 board appointees have been recommended, even though if they were there, they would not be voting members until the board order actually passed. They'd be there for the deliberation and discussion. Without objection, I think we could probably grant that. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that there was note of that somewhere.
Okay. I think that just became a note.
Blue note.
Oh, that is true.
Perfect.
It's in the order.
That is
The effective date is in the order, right?
And the appointments that were just made are varying in termination of the date of the term.
I see.
Yeah, those are the end dates, but Commissioner Bozovich is asking basically, is the Homes for Good board with this vote, did we just create the new board?
Yes.
And it's my understanding that we did.
The sound of the gavel created the new board.
Yeah.
So, one reason to use a gavel. Thank you. With that, thank you to the Homes for Good board and the Homes for Good staff for being with us today. And thank you for the years it took to get us to this moment in time. Let's move down the agenda.
If we could move back up the agenda.
Back up the agenda to item 8, which is County Council.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Down and up the agenda. Mr. Dingle, County Council, and I'll call on you personally, not ask Mr. Rickoff to introduce you because you are our employee.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for your indulgence on what I had to deal with this morning here. I just wanted to take a moment and advise the board that I received word that the first tranche of opioid money will be delivered or will be wired to us on July 30th. That will be, and I believe there's actually going to be a couple of different disbursements, but the annual or the first annual net payment is $511,047.63. So that's the amount of the settlement, less the attorney fees, less the backstop and those sorts of things. That's the net amount of money that will come to Lane.
Can you say that amount again more slowly?
Sure. $511,047.63. But that may not, but what I'm saying is that amount of money will not necessarily all come July 30th. It's expected that there's going to be 2 disbursements this calendar year.
All right.
One now and one approximately in October.
Thank you, Mr. Dingle. Any discussion, any questions? Commissioner Bozievich.
So I have to return to the last item a little bit. We appointed new board members, 7 new board members to Homes for Good. We have not changed the board's appointees at all. So can I show up and vote next week? Because we have not taken an official action to appoint 2 board members. The current board is all on Homes for Good. I mean,
Well, I wasn't here for the discussion. I know I've been discussing in general terms with Mr. Fox, but I understood that the new board was created effective today. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the old board that had every single board member on it.
That's
we
my
haven't
presumption, which
appointed
is not
anyone as a
absolutely.
voting member from this board.
I'm really confused. Previous board, one that existed prior to today, had all members of the Board of Commissioners on that board, correct? They all had a vote, correct?
Correct.
It is my understanding that the action that the board just took created a new board that does not have all of the members of the Board of Commissioners on it, that only has 2 positions. Is that right? I just want to make sure because I haven't read through the material, but that was my understanding where they were going.
The board order has no board of commissioners on it, just appoints the 7 others, but it also does include adopted this 19th day of July 2022 as the final.
It makes absolutely no mention of our representation or even creating the new board. It just says we're appointing those 7.
I believe that. Chair, if I may. I believe the approval of the adoption of the new governance model happened in previous meetings. We didn't need to restate that today. And so technically, I think what Commissioner Bozievich's concern is, Mr. Dingle, is that because we haven't yet passed an order designating the 2 representatives from the county commission, there are technically no official representatives from the Board of County Commission on the Homes for Good board until that August 2nd board order passes.
I think that I'm just looking, I'm assuming that the board order that's referenced here of 2109, 2108 is the one that created the new form of governance with the 2 board members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the board will have 2 board members on it when they're appointed, but they have not been formally appointed, as I understand it. That's going to happen on August 2nd. So are you asking if they could vote next? So the answer, I think, is this. There are no board members that can vote next week at the Homes for Good meeting.
But I just want to make sure that was
very good. And I see Mr. Fox is still watching, observing the meeting. And it'd be pretty, I don't know, it's out of my hands, but if we didn't actually have any action at the next meeting, since we don't have a complete board, but that's not my call. Commissioner Bozievich, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure it was understood.
If there's any revision after you have a chance to peruse that a little bit more deeply, Mr. Dingle, please send it forward. Commissioner Buck.
I'm going to go back to your original announcement regarding the opioid settlement of the 511,000. So remind me, what is the next steps for us as a board to do, knowing this funding is coming in and how we're going to actually utilize this resource?
Chair for Commissioner Buck, the fund has been set up. It's my understanding, Ms. Moody, Mr. Tintle, because we did have to set this up as a special fund. Think of it like TRT money or gas tax revenue. You can't just spend it on anything. You'll recall, and I had a conversation with Commissioner Trieger this morning, the big battle with the state, in addition to not allowing the state to have the money and then pass it through to us, make a direct payment, was the state wanted to limit what we could do with the money. At the national level, a committee was formed between the defendants and the plaintiffs' lawyers overseen by the court. And what they arrived at is what is referred to as Exhibit E to the National Settlement Agreement. And what it is, it's about a 10 or 11 page document that lists all of the approved uses for the opioid settlement. The state wanted to significantly limit that. For example, one of the examples that they did not want us to be able to do was spend money on opioid money on capital expenditures. So for example, one of the things that I've suggested to the city of Cottage Grove, because the amount of money that they receive, is that they could, when building out the clinic, the South Lane Clinic, designate a certain number of square feet for substance abuse treatment, and the cost per square foot of that part of the facility could be paid for with opioid money, just as an example. So if you'd like, I'll dig out, I think I've previously sent it to you, but I'll find it again because it's part of a like 300-page agreement, but I'll send the board Exhibit E and you can see what it is. It is extremely, extremely broad. Anything to do that you can imagine dealing with substance abuse is pretty much covered.
So I'm guessing that we're going to have staff come back to us and present us with options on how to utilize those resources.
I assume that someone's going to do that. Yeah, it's not really a legal thing. It's a policy thing for the board, but you'll see, I'll certainly send it to you so you can see the kinds of things that you can, that it could be used for. But just like I said, think of anything related to substance abuse and it's pretty much covered in that document.
Right on, Commissioner Burney.
I'm going to follow up on that a bit, but with Mr. Rickoff. So is Commissioner Buck correct that we will receive at some point either a report or a proposal from staff on specifically how they're recommending these dollars be used?
Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, yes, that is accurate. The conversations have already started. We have been looking at reduction in marijuana treatment dollars and not treatment, but prevention dollars. And so we're already seeing pretty compelling need in terms of the prevention work. So the conversation has begun. Several departments are very much interested in having the funds put aside. So I think there'll be a rich conversation, and we'll be bringing you both the report on that conversation as well as the proposal.
That's the most eloquent yes, Mr. Rickoff, I have heard. Thank you very much.
Every word necessary and valuable.
Yes.
Commissioner Brozovich.
Thank you. I just very quickly want to say thank you to our county council for his role in obtaining this settlement coming directly to the counties. We talk about this mostly in executive sessions, so the public's not aware, but our county council was instrumental in getting the state to agree to have the direct payments to the counties. So we didn't have a lot of limitations. So we got the funds without having to beg the state and then signing their onerous contracts that throw all the liability on us and all the benefits on them. But, you know, it's his work. You know, he was the leader for all the plaintiffs basically in the state. Pushing that issue to have the money come directly to the plaintiffs and not through the state. So much appreciated your work on this effort on this. Mr. Dingle.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Brozovich, thank you. I'm not sure that instrumental is the word that the state would use to describe me.
But I'll say that, you know, every county and every municipality involved in this owes you a debt of gratitude, Mr. Dingle. Commissioner Burney.
Would the word be non-instrumental? That's rhetorical, sir. I want to thank you also, Mr. Dingle, and ask a question in that regard. Not all the money is coming to counties, correct? What was the split again where the state is holding dollars at the state, or is that a dated understanding?
No, Chair Farr, no, Chair Farr, Commissioner Burney, no, that's not a dated question. So the split is 55-45, but remember, one of the things that I pointed out to our colleagues is the state has no ability to provide services. They will be, I mean, that one of the things we wanted to avoid is they're spending the first $3 or $4 million of their money creating a committee and a staff. And then they're going to establish a grant process where you will apply for grants and then they'll deliberate and do it. So the reality is that second 45%, my prediction is you're not going to see any of the process from the state for probably at least 18 months or 2 years, which is why we were so, right. That's what we're, and again, my point being, they did, I gave a great example. People from the state didn't know what a MAT clinic was. They literally said, "What's a MAT clinic?" So
smaller than a carpet clinic.
so the expectation is
Bigger
that
than a
since the
throw rug
state, the expectation is that since the state does not provide any direct services, they will need to go to, guess who? The local governments to provide those services. So we're actually going to pick up part of that additional 45%. The problem, of course, is that it will come with the types of conditions that Commissioner Bozovich met, the same ones that came with our CRF money.
Thank you.
Well, all in all, very good news, Mr. Dingle. Thank you very much. And any further announcements?
No further announcements.
Right on. Mr. Rickoff will move down the agenda to county administration. Do you have any announcements?
In terms of announcements, I
I'm
would
sorry.
like to thank Commissioner Trieger for talking about the Lane County Fair. It is indeed Wednesday through Sunday, starts at 11. Well, I know it starts at 11 during the weekdays, but the policies and practices, particularly around clear bags, was very eloquently stated. I did want to cover the World Championships. Things are going well. 4 out of the 6 events that are of the road events that have been held on MLK Boulevard have occurred at this point, all without incident other than some traffic challenges that were worked out over time, and certainly nothing to take away from the remarkable nature of the event. So we have 2 events remaining, one on Friday, one on Sunday. To date, the only real challenge was the initial move-in, which shut down our lots for a little bit. But after some very frank and brisk conversations with the organizers, we were able to get that. So our lots and our traffic patterns have been unimpeded. Thank you again for your leadership in making sure that we were well represented in terms of those critical services on the Cebu campus. It has been without challenges, but all of the challenges have been manageable. And with that, just a reminder that Steve Mokryski is out of town for the next 2 weeks. I will be serving, acting in capacity until the start of August. He has the NACO conference initially, and then he has some well-deserved TM with family. So you will have me at your disposal for the next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Rickoff. Then we'll move back to item B under county council, under county administration, which is Order 22-1707-196 in the matter of adopting the Lane County fiscal year 22-23 to fiscal year 26-27 capital improvement plan. And today, Mr. Mokryski, Mr. Rickoff, I'll ask you to introduce the panel, which may or may not be here.
Well, and I do believe that Christine Moody will be on the screen, and I think I saw Sean Waite with her as well. Christine, would you like to take it away?
Thank you. Yes, Chair Farr, Commissioners. I also have, as mentioned, Sean Waite and then Sasha Vartanian from Public Works with regard to the road and bridge projects, if there's any questions on those. So hopefully you are seeing my screen and a PowerPoint presentation.
We are.
I'm not hearing no's. Okay, so we'll just go through that. I just have a very brief presentation. And just to highlight again, since the commissioners received an email from us last night with an updated CIP document, the materials that were posted to the website until last night, that plan was slightly changed based on 2 projects that changed. So the document that is posted out there now is the document that we are discussing today. So just in case anyone had pulled that electronic copy. And let's see if I can move through the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is our 5th consecutive year of doing a county-wide CIP, and our goals have remained the same to maintain our assets. The goals are to provide policymakers in the community with the ability to see and learn more about the projects that are planned over the next 5 years, and enables prioritization and some decision making when we have all of this together in one document for you to review. So there are still the same 3 types of projects in the plan that we've had for the last 3 or 4 years. We have standard, what we refer to as standard projects. They have both identified funding and have completed their planning processes, so they're ready to go. We also have pre-planning projects, things that either do not have identified funding or are still working on some piece of their planning process. So we have that category really to highlight the needs that are still out there. You'll see there's quite a few pre-planning projects, so we want to see what's coming. Might be after the 5-year time period, but just to keep that rolling projects that are in the works and needed. And then we have community investments. The county is involved in various areas, both in roads and bridges and different facilities where we're investing in assets that we don't own as a county, but we're putting significant investment into them. So we want to highlight those capital projects, even if they're not appearing within the county's capital project budget per se. So for this plan, we still kept the monetary threshold of asking for projects that were 50,000 and above. So there are smaller things that still might be considered a capital expense that are in the budget, but they wouldn't be part of this plan. Categories, still facilities, meaning buildings. Fleet, facilities could also cover parking lots, some of those other pieces that really our capital program staff helps manage. Fleet, meaning the fleet system, so not talking about individual vehicles, but anything with the system as a whole, things like charging stations or other infrastructure that's needed. Parks, meaning the park land, roads and bridges, solid waste. Did I hear? Okay, sorry, maybe someone just got solid waste, and then technology projects. And again, focused there on systems, so technology systems. All right, so the categories, just to show a few summaries here. So the project amounts by category. So we have 4 categories that are being utilized in the standard forms in the plan in front of you. Facilities, solid waste, roads, and parks. Roads still does have the predominance of expenses in the plan, but followed by facilities, then solid waste, and then some parks improvements. Another way to see the projects over the 5-year period. So you can see the ones that are planned. Roads does have the things planned out. You can see year 3 is when they will have their largest of the 3-year period. And then we also see parks having things planned out until year 4, and then facilities out to year 3. So there are committees that review these projects. So facilities subcommittee is one that the commissioners are familiar with, where they're reviewing those facilities projects with an eye towards working on getting a 5-year plan out there for the entire period of the CIP. So we're beginning to see that be planned out further here. So total of 5-year expenses in the plan is about $109.5 million. And the projects are funded with a variety of sources. I mean, many of these haven't changed. The one that has come into play is the American Rescue Plan funds that were designated for capital projects. So if you look at the forms that are in the plan, you'll see that we did add a comment section so that you can see if the project does have American Rescue Plan funds involved in it. And then also as part of this plan, you do have a board order that you'll approve today that does give delegated authority related to some roads and bridges contracts so that they can move forward with their projects. But we're still continuing any other project where there might be delegated authority needed. That's a separate action from your approval of this CIP today. So they would come back to you as a board to get that delegated authority. And I think highlighting the form, we talked about the committee with the facilities. Technology has the technology management group who recommends policy of what constitutes a CIP project. And then the public works, the roads and bridges now combined in this document. That's been going on for a few years, so we'll stop saying that to you every time. But historically, roads and bridges had their own CIP, and they have discontinued that, and now everything is found in one place, which should make it more accessible for the public to find the capital projects. And then because I mentioned the community investments, just to highlight those for you, they are in the plan and they have their individual forms. But as mentioned, they do cover a few different things. There's a City of Lowell multi-purpose conference room, a community health center, the South Lane Clinic in Cottage Grove that we're investing in. And then the rest of them are related to public works, transfer station paving, and some roads and bridges dust mitigation that the road and bridge program works on. So we are recommending approval of the plan as submitted to you, but are open for any questions and comments. And then we will print the plan. And then, as mentioned, Public Works will be able to move forward with contracting on their roads and bridges portion of their projects within the CIP. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Moody, for making that concise. We're up against a noon timeline. And so we'll move forward then with the discussion and or motion for order number 220719-06 to the board. Commissioner Bozievich.
So first, I'd just like to say thank you to Sean and a lot of staff that have put this together. One of the things that's changed a little bit with this year's is we went through a much more deliberate process around facilities where we looked at criticality and various issues and how it met certain goals and what would happen on failure, et cetera, to rank projects. So there's a much more deliberate ranking of projects in the facilities side, which I think is, useful. And I think it's something that's been happening in the roads CIP for years. And it's good, just best practice of asset management. So you get, your most needed projects done first with, as you use up your available money. Again, it's a place where I wish we had a lot more money because we have much more need than the funding we should be doing. Every year we put off projects, cost more. So just wanted to let folks know that. And with that, I'd like to move order 2207-1906.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Bozievich and seconded by Commissioner Burney. We have order number 2207-1906. Discussion to the motion. I am seeing none other than to point out that we've had a significant number of new capital projects in the last 4 or 5 years that have resulted in greater levels of service for Lane County. Thank you, Ms. Moody. With no discussion to the motion, further discussion to the motion, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Once again, Ms. Moody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Then, Ms. Rickoff, will move directly into item 9C, which is a discussion in the matter of approving a timeline and process for convening the Lane County Charter Review Committee. And today we have a panel which, Mr. Rickoff, I will ask you to introduce.
Chair of our commissioners, I'm being joined by Judy Williams and Jenna Cusimano. It's my understanding that Jenna is going to lead the effort.
Thank you, Greg. Good morning, Chair Farr, Commissioners. The item before you this morning is to discuss the timeline and process for convening the Lane County Charter Review Committee. The charter for Lane County was approved by voters in 1962. There have been a number of amendments since that time, and the summary of those amendments are included within your packet. In 2010, Lane County voters approved an amendment to the charter directing the board to convene a charter review committee. The purpose of this board is to review and recommend changes or updates to the existing charter every 10 years. If you're paying attention to that timeline, 10 years after 2010 would have been 2020. We had a lot going on that year, including the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the Holiday Farm Fire response and recovery efforts. Due to that, there was limited staff capacity to move forward with reconvening the Charter Review Committee, which is why it's coming to both before you now, a little overdue. The Charter Review Committee is comprised of 7 members, 5 appointed by the Board of Commissioners, and those 5 appointments will nominate an additional 2 at-large positions subsequently appointed by the board. So the charter is our foundational guide for Lane County. It covers things like administration, powers, elections, personnel, finances, and spending. Following the redistricting efforts that took place in 2021, We're looking to incorporate feedback received from the redistricting process to revise committee application materials and the appointment process for commissioners for this committee, if you so recommend. So the process for the timeline is that the committee would get together and ultimately refer any proposed amendments to the charter for an election. The possible elections in which this could occur would be the next regularly scheduled Lane County election is November 8th, 2022. However, the last date to file a board referred measure for this election is August 19th, which is clearly coming up very soon. It's just a month out, so that doesn't allow enough time for us to convene this charter review committee and allow time for a review. March 2023 is the next possible election date. The date at which this would need to be referred to the county clerk is December 16th, which also still does not allow a lot of time for review. Board referred measures for the May 16th election, 2023, they need to be filed with the county clerk by February 24th. So that would give the committee approximately 7 months from today's meeting. So obviously it'll take some time to assemble the committee, but there would be a reasonable amount of time in which we would be able to potentially revise those application materials, appoint members, and then solicit some public engagement in that recommendation process. During the review time, if staff feels, the board feels, or if the Charter Review Committee feels that there's enough discussion and engagement that would warrant further time to the process, additional dates could be considered for the August 2023 election or November 7th, 2023. The only caveat I would note is that all elections aside from the May election, the burden of the election cost would be on the county unless there's other measures referred to those ballots. So that's one of the reasons why we are recommending just a high level process timeline to aim for that May 2023 election. So our recommendation is to have staff review and revise the application materials for the board appointments based on feedback that Judy received during the redistricting process. And then with that, move forward with the vacancies and appointments with the goal of getting the initial appointment process completed by the end of September 2022. So bear in mind, this would be a 2-level board appointment process, as the 5 board appointed members would be nominating 2 subsequent at-large members. So there will be 2 meetings at which you will be reviewing the appointments for the Charter Review Committee. So that's all the notes that I have. Again, just a very high level proposed process and timeline for moving forward. All we're really looking for from you all today is if that timeline seems appropriate, with the goal of aiming towards having any amendments referred to the May 2023 election. And then if you approve staff reviewing and revising the committee application materials based on feedback received from the redistricting process and any other notes you may have, and then just coming back to you with that appointment at the end of September.
Excellent, Ms. Cusimano. And then basically what you're asking then is for us to approve the high level timeline and request that staff provide maybe a more detailed timeline and move forward with the application materials, et cetera. Okay.
Correct.
Very good. Then let's talk about it. Any discussion from the board? Commissioner Buck.
I'll just start with the timeline. I agree that there's just no way it's feasible prior to the May 2023 election. That particular timeline still, I think, is pretty tight, given we have to go through this election and appoint people on our board, and the holidays hit. And so I'm not sure how much time the committee will be able to review the charter. And so that brings me to a question of, are they just looking at that portion of the charter regarding redistricting? Are they looking at multiple?
The entire charter would be up for review.
So if that's the case, I'm thinking that that May election cycle may still be a little tight and it may have to be pushed out. I'm okay with like trying to make that a beginning target, but I would just say that that most likely is not going to be enough time, and we'll have to think of the following November. And that, as you said, they're depending on who else is actually putting something forward.
So August is also an option as well as November.
Right, but I was thinking November because other people may be putting something on the ballot, in which case the costs will be less than if we're doing it all by itself.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. I concur with your assessment. Further discussion, Commissioner Bozvich.
I'll just make note that the charter requires us to form the committee every 10 years, not to actually hold the election on that 10th year. So if we choose to delay the election, we're not violating the charter. And we're only really, beginning in 2021 every 10 years. So we just missed the 21 deadline. We're only 7 months late getting the committee together. So we're not really that far out of what's required under the charter, understandably. And I think it took us into 2012 before we had the first amendments based on a charter review committee, because it took the charter review committee quite a while to get through a lot of Scribner stuff and the various other issues that they did at that time. And most of it was just technical corrections, sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, because it is our base constitution for the county. It's not legislation. It's a founding organizational document like bylaws and other stuff. You usually don't make a lot of major changes unless there's a real need for it. So yeah, and the process is fairly well spelled out in the charter that we each pick somebody to appoint. And I would support staff's recommendation to go ahead and get the process moving so we can get our appointees selected.
Excellent. Then I see no further discussion, no further. Oh, Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I would just have a question on the process. If I'm understanding you, when you talk about learning from the redistricting committee, you mean as far as the actual recruitment and application, the idea of a blinded and the pool of applicants coming to each of us for our district and so on. And does it, I apologize, I didn't read through carefully if it's in the materials. Are we each to appoint someone from our district, or is it simply that each districted commissioner gets to appoint someone? In other words, can I appoint someone who is not a?
That's not spelled out specifically in the bylaws. So if you have a preference to try and appoint someone from within your district, you certainly can, but it's not required.
It doesn't even spell out that they have to be a Lane County elector.
Great, thank you. That was the other. And then the other is there room or opportunity if someone on this board has a person in mind, does everyone need to go through the application process is what I'm getting at. So if I had I don't, but if I had a particular person in mind, I would encourage them to submit an application, not I could just say, I'm going to appoint you and hope a majority of my colleagues agree. Is that correct?
I mean, my preference would be, and I can look to Judy as well, would be that we have everyone complete the application prior to being appointed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then, Ms. Rickoff, I think when we come to review of assignments, your review should include that we have a kind of a target date of the May 2023, potentially pushing that beyond depending on how the more details of the timeline evolve, and that this Board of Commissioners, as it sits here, will each appoint. So the timeline would include this Board of Commissioners making the appointments to the Charter Review Committee. So that will all happen early before January of next year. So, Ms. Rickoff, do you have instructions that will give you a good body of output for review of assignments?
Chair Farr will have a chance to test that in just a few moments.
Very good. Then with that, thank you for do you have everything that you need? We agree, and I believe without disagreement that we've given the assignment to Ms. Rickoff. Ms. Williams, thank you very much. Anything you'd like to add?
No, Chair Farr and Commissioners, just thanks for your time and good to see you all in person. Thank you.
Right on. Then we will move down our agenda. The item 10, I'm going to kind of meld with item 14, and we'll move to item 11, which is Commissioners' business announcements and or future board assignment requests? Commissioner Buck.
Just a quick announcement. I was able to attend opening night at the World Games and it was spectacular. It really was.
Two F-17s.
I know, yeah. They did have the jets go by, which scared my little one because that was not expected. But it was pretty cool. If you have not had a chance to get inside of the new Hayward Stadium, it's phenomenal. The excitement and energy is just off the charts. We were able to walk around. We saw a lot of people that we knew. Everybody seemed to at least come at least once in order to just experience the whole thing. And the athletes are the best of the best across the world. And a lot of the small towns were able to host certain countries. And that has been an experience in and of itself. Down in Cottage Grove, they were able to host Botswana and have lots of stories about being able to take them out and entertain them when they could. And, you know, upriver and the Mackenzie, they were able to host Ireland. It's just a phenomenal opportunity. And I really hope everybody gets a chance to experience it while it's going on here, and hope that in the future we might be able to be successful in another bid again.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. Further announcements and or board assignments? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just echo Commissioner Buck's comments, and Cresswell, a friend of mine in Cresswell, is hosting Finland. It was really fun. I got a chance to be inside Hayward on Sunday, and it was wonderful, especially seeing the Jamaican women take a 1, 2, 3 and they're so fast. You literally, if you blink, you miss the event. Is remarkable. But I also just want for anyone watching to remind folks, there is also the Eugene Riverfront Festival, which is more accessible if you don't have the ability to buy a ticket and get inside Hayward. The giant screen is really giant. The resolution's really good. The sound's really good. And you can watch the events there out in the fresh open air. Lots of great community organizations tabling and food available. And that's a great scene too. I did that Friday and got inside Hayward Sunday. And it's really just thrilling and exciting, and watching people of all ages and hearing all the different languages being spoken, and watching everybody just appreciate the pursuit of human excellence in athletic performances at the highest level is pretty spectacular to have here in our own backyard.
You, Vice Chair. Further announcements and or assignments? I just mentioned that 2 of my grandchildren are 1/8 Finn and 1/4 Irish. So,
if I may, the World Athletics are also occurring in other parts of the United States. Women's softball World Athletics occurred in, I forget which town in Alabama, but it was front and center for us, not as front and center as its festivities at Hayward Field, in that my daughter was calling it on CBS Sports. So anyway, it's an exciting time, and it's a nice time to celebrate positive things. So let's just do that, and I won't talk about negative things right now.
there is a lot of good, and if you look across the street right now, you'll see the Lane County Farmers Market in full operation in its new digs. I love it. What a great backdrop to you, Mr. Rickoff. You should turn around and look. Then, without further ado, no more commissioners' announcements or future board assignments. Mr. Rickoff, what are your assignments?
I have 2 assignments and one, just a quick clarification. The first assignment is that on August 2nd, you will have a board order for the appointment of Chair Farr and Commissioner Buck to the Homes for Good board. The second assignment is the timeline application and selection process for the Charter Review Committee to move apace to hit as best as possible a May 2023 election cycle, which means that would return to you in early fall. And then just a quick clarification, the opioid funding is going to be processed through the ARPA committee. The ARPA committee, of course, is made up of all of the directors, both elected and appointed. That'll give the organization a chance to truly vet the use of those funds and come back to you with options as well as a possible recommendation.
Good to have that committee in place ahead of time. What excellent
sir.
further use of that committee. Very good. Any questions or comments on the assignments? Then we'll move directly into other business, any other business before we move into executive session.
My knowledge.
We'll have an opportunity potentially after executive session. At this time, then, Mr. Rickoff, I'm going to read us into executive session. At the sound of the gavel, we will be recessed as the Board of County Commissioners and will enter into executive session, which will convene at 1:30 p.m. in the board conference room. So, I'm sorry, no, excuse me, via remote. So we'll be in our offices, or in my case, not there, I'm afraid. So the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise.